You all know what Saturday means. It's yet another edition of your favorite NFL podcast going out there, ladies and gentlemen, for 80 episodes now. Justin, we're slowly getting close to the triple digits. Man, who'd have thought it's the meme. Who'd have thought that? Not me. But in all seriousness, memes slightly aside, because this podcast it basically kind of is a meme in and of itself. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Here for yet another fantastic week of fun football chaos. And of course, I myself, Iceman Jerg, am always joined by at least one compatriot on a weekly basis. Our other one, he is temporarily out for the moment. We may see him later in the episode. We may not, because he has real life stuff. The Podfather is actually doing real things that Podfathers do. I don't know what most Podfathers do, but Rick can tell us that when he rejoins the show. But joining me on this week's episode, one of my trusted compatriots, a man of consistency, the next great game show host of America itself, Justin. How we doing?
Doing good, man. Excited to talk some more football.
Yes, and of course, easily the two most aesthetically pleasing backgrounds in the history of podcasting, between myself, whether I'm in Connecticut or New York, and Justin with the pure background behind him. Which actually, I prefer that in most cases. I think a more pure background is what the people want. So that's the way to go. So A1 on that end, Justin. A1 on that end, to say the very least. Interesting week 7 it was, Justin. By the title of the episode, it was a relatively unlucky week 7 for a good amount of teams and maybe some players here and there, which we'll get into relatively in short order here, because as much as we always talk about fun, we are going to take a 1-week hiatus of the fun this week, ladies and gentlemen. We do not have a mind-blowing fact because, well, the Podfather's not here. And we're going to take a break from some of the other games this week because, honestly, it's more fun when we're all together, even when we have Billy Shakes in one of the corners of the screen when he's saying and doing nothing. Don't ask me exactly how that adds to the program, but it does, at least in our hearts. So we're going to actually skip a lot of this. We're going to go straight into the meat and potatoes of this week. So, we'll still have plenty of fun, but it's right into the football. The teeth, we're running right into the teeth of things, Justin. And week 7, unlucky to say the very least, or lucky, considering the point of view on certain things. And of course, actually, this is going to lead some discussion here in a few moments once we kind of get through the bulk of the games from last week. We are going to be discussing the trade deadline, ladies and gentlemen, because on Halloween Day, 4 p.m. is the trade deadline. So that is the cutoff time for trades to be made in the NFL. And still some wheeling and dealing to be done. You have a full 24 hours, and then considering 4 p.m. on Tuesday. So you got what, like a good 30 to 36 hours, Justin, after the Sunday Night Football game is completed to make moves. Unless you're the teams playing on Monday Night Football, then you have even less time. But it's going to be interesting, and we're going to kind of talk about what could happen at the deadline, if we are expecting anything to happen, which I think is a different story this year compared to what last year was. We were actually discussing pre-show. But before I get to that, Justin, let's talk about what was a really peculiar week 7, to say the very least. What game do you want to hit on? Or maybe if it's like maybe two games that were very similar to one another, if you want to like hit the both of them together, Justin. What is the first observation that you want to make about what week 7 was?
Oh, there was a ton of upsets, obviously. I mean, there's some major things. I would say probably the biggest upset has to be that Bills-Patriots game. I mean, for it to have been close was a big story, but something's up with the Bills. I mean, look, I've always said something is up with the Bills. There's something off about that team that is the difference between a championship team and just a really good playoff team. But there's something different going on here because for about 4 straight weeks, the Bills have seemed very human. And if you're going to make a mistake against a well-coached team like the Patriots, I mean, look, they may be missing some talent. They may not be the best team anymore. They're not the Giants of the AFC that they used to be. But that being said, they're still a well-coached team. And Bill Belichick is going to make you pay for mistakes. And the Bills just could not get out of their own way that entire game. Outside that Dolphins game, they really haven't played well in the AFC East. So the Jets coming out of their bye week are now a half game out of second place. Miami has a tight hold on first place. And look, this could be an issue for this Bills team. I know they won on Thursday night, but they're really going to have to play well down the stretch. They still have a bye week coming up, which is going to set them back a game. They have the current lead right now, and there's a good chance that they're struggling for a playoff spot late in the year.
Right, and let's just make brief mention of it because I think we might as well just compound the two together, considering we started this off with Buffalo. Even that Thursday night game, like I know Tampa's been scrappy to start the season, but it was extremely close, man. I remember
Certainly
when
on
they
their way
lost.
away from winning.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
only a 6-point victory for them.
and when we were talking about like to start the season after the Jets game, Justin, like the both of us said to the immediate game after, which I want to say I think it was the Raiders, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
That was a game to get your revenge on, to get out your frustrations and to play extremely well. And I think most people would have gone with the logic of, okay, Buffalo's going to do a similar thing here. 24-18 victory, and honestly, a missed pass interference call at the end of the game. You give Tampa Bay a chance right at the what would it have been at the goal line? Maybe I'll say at least within the 3, within 3 yards to the end zone. Like you were like, I'll just be explicit with you. You're a referee call away from maybe having lost that game. We can't rule out that possibility.
Which is the second one in recent memory because they almost lost that way to the Giants as well.
Yep.
There was a missed call, and I mean the guy was clearly being held.
Yeah.
So I mean, look, you're getting calls going your way right now. There might be a major issue.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know for this portion, Bills fans will feel like we're kind of dunking on their team here. Which, if you feel that way, I mean, go ahead. Maybe you could argue we are, but I think there's rhyme or reason behind this, very much so, because I think you look at the way the Bills have played this season, and Justin, remember, I was saying this in the preseason, man. I was saying this when we were picking the division. Like, I picked the Bills to win. I think we all did, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe one of us diverged from that path. It's probably Rick, but ultimately, I felt there was something off about this team. There's just something about the Buffalo Bills the last couple of seasons. And like you said, it's the difference between being a really good team, man, and being a bona fide championship contender. And I think there's still something missing. Now, and to mention like what the arguments against that would be, I know a lot of Bills fans would point out the fact with injuries that this team has been on the defensive side of the ball, has been getting injured to hell in a handbasket at times. And I think there is some legitimacy to that. You're missing a couple key starters, of course, Matt Milano, Tre'Davious White. You're allowed to bring up those points for sure. But even aside from the defense, which even with the injuries, you got to give them their credit. Like they're doing the best they can. It's the offense, I think, is the bigger concern if you're Buffalo, because how against New England do you sputter so badly in the first half? Like, you shouldn't need to come back down against the Patriots 2 scores to win a game. Like, you put up 24 points against the Buccaneers, which we were kind of talking about. That team is riding off of like the idea of momentum and vibes and all that. I think they should have put up more than just 24 against Tampa. All due respect to Tampa Bay's defense, I think that Buffalo could have and should have done way better than that. So I think if you're the Bills right now, like, yes, you've been suffering injuries on the defense. I don't think the defense is the problem personally, man. I think it's actually the offense, because if it's not Josh Allen throwing it to Stephon Diggs, it feels like there's a lot of inconsistency there.
Yeah, I mean, look, they got a couple of other guys involved this this past game. They had Dalton Kincaid had his best game as a rookie. I believe Khalil Shakir had some catches, but look, there's a lot of turnovers. There just are. I mean, Josh Allen alone has 13 turnovers so far this year? It's a lot. It's hard to win when you're turning the ball over at such a high clip. And I mean, he's averaging at least an interception a game. He's fumbled 3 times that they've lost. How are you supposed to win games offensively? How are you supposed to put up points if you keep giving the ball away?
Yeah. It's very mistake heavy, not capitalizing at times where I think they should have. You're seeing very sloppy play out of a team that, Stephon Diggs is a top 10 receiver in this league, I think.
Maybe so.
Top 5 at times, but I think we could say minimum is top 10. And I know there have been struggles with the running attack for, it feels like, forever there, but you've been able to make do with it. You've invested what you have invested in this team in the running backs, whether it be a trade last year for a guy who, granted, he's not playing this season, but a couple draft picks as well. And now you have Josh Allen, who's supposed to be an MVP candidate. He's not playing like an MVP candidate. Like, it's just the fact of the matter. I feel like for the last 3 seasons, going back to 2021, like, people swear up and down Josh Allen MVP candidate for the season, and he'll have a game where he does play like that, and he's going to follow it up, I think, with 2 games where it's like, like that Patriots game, you can't start out that sloppy. You just can't. There's no excuse for it.
Well, I mean, look, he's still an MVP candidate. Let's not act like he doesn't have 17 passing touchdowns here. He's got 2,000 yards in 8 games. He's
I mean,
playing. He's playing well.
but 5-3 through 8 games with those stats, like it's not bad, but it's like some
Yeah,
guys
no.
are doing better.
The issue is they should be up. They should have more. I mean, he's accounted for over 20 plus touchdowns already. He's got all the yards. They have all the stats, and it's not translating because they're turning the ball over at a high enough clip. I mean, they're blowing teams out like Miami, but then they're losing to a team like New England. That's not okay. They're having a close game against a team like the Giants, who, albeit has played better the last couple weeks, it's not a good team. They're not a team that you should be, coming up short against. The Buccaneers, who again have played well this season, they've proved me wrong in terms of their win stats already. I think I had them at 4 wins for the season. I can't imagine they're going to lose, the next 10 straight. But it's not like they've played poorly, but they're not world beaters either. You know what I mean? They just lost to the Falcons.
Like you said, I think inconsistency is the way to describe the Bills right now. And like when you're that inconsistent, like it's just the best thing you can do. Like it sounds so cliche, and it's probably something a coach would say, but it's just you got to be able to take the good and the bad, and you just got to push from there and figure out what the mistakes have been. What are you doing not that good in? And you maybe just have to try to overwhelm people when you can with your strengths. And if you can't do that, you got to be able to overcome that. Like getting comfortable when you're uncomfortable, I think is something that a lot of people like. This is just a daily motto you should take in life in general, people. So here's some free information, free facts for the people. But yeah, you gotta get comfortable when you're uncomfortable. And I think the thing with that Patriots game, and even to an extent the Buccaneers, although again they won that game, but just Tampa kept it close, is that I feel like when the Bills are forced out of their rhythm of play, they don't necessarily have, I don't know if it's weapons. I don't necessarily want to say it's the weapons. It's just there's something there when it's like if they don't get to play the way they want to play, they struggle a lot more. And I know some people are going to say, well, can't you say that for most good teams? I don't know, man. I think the Kansas City Chiefs could beat you in 3 or 4 different ways. And I'm just talking about what the offense can do. I think with a fully healthy Joe Burrow, we've seen the Cincinnati Bengals the last 2 seasons be able to beat you in various ways. I think if the Bills don't get to beat you in their branded way, they struggle the most of those AFC contenders. And it just goes to show because the last 2 seasons, it's the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game and then winning the Super Bowl. And it was the Bengals making it to the Super Bowl and making it to the AFC Championship game last year. And they beat Buffalo. Like we're talking, I know we're talking long term, but the Bills, like you're at a stage in your franchise where the goal should be get to January and get there as a really good team. I still think they're going to get to. Well, I think we both agree, and I think Rick would make it a hat trick. We know they're going to get to January, but what type of what type of team are we going to see come January? That's the biggest question right now.
Well, yeah. So the issue is, I mean, since that Miami game, they played the Jaguars, the Giants, the Patriots, and the Buccaneers. Really, one team with a winning record. The Bucs, I guess, technically have a losing record now. They're averaging under 21 points, and their defense has gotten banged up. They've lost a few players, a few starters. They're going to be there. We're supposed to be their guys on that defense for the rest of the year, and now they're coming to the thick part of their schedule. They have to play in Cincinnati. They have the Broncos at home. They have to play the Jets again. They have to play the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Chargers, the Patriots again, and in Miami. That's a tough schedule.
And they're notorious for struggling in Miami, as most AFC teams do. But they've struggled in Miami the last couple times.
Look, even if you give them the Miami game and you get let's say they'll win against the Patriots in Buffalo, because that's 2 wins there. So that's 7 wins. How many more wins are on that schedule? The Jets have a tough defense. They always play Josh Allen well. The Cowboys, look, the Cowboys have had a couple of bad weeks, but they're still the Cowboys. That defense is solid. That offense can put up a ton of points, especially if they end up making a trade at the deadline. The Eagles are coming off a Super Bowl appearance. The Chiefs are coming off a Super Bowl appearance.
The Bengals might have momentum if the Bengals win this next week.
Bye week.
Yeah, they're coming out the bye week now. They have their game against San Francisco in week 8. You're saying that the Bengals, if they win the San Fran game, or if they're at least competitive, you're talking about a Cincinnati Bengals team that is starting to find their momentum. And we know the Bengals notorious for being a second half of the season team. Like This is a team that thrives in mid-late November and going into December and January. We could say that about the Bengals. We can't say that about Buffalo. Like you bring up a lot of great points. Like I think the Bills' first 8 games of the season was meant for them to have a really good record going into the second half of the season. And they didn't come out on that end in the way. Like 5-3, okay, above 500. Are you going for 2 games above 500 for Buffalo? No. The expectation should be higher. Like I think this is a conversation we need to revisit in like 3-4 weeks times once they've had a couple of the like in depth like this, once they've had a couple of these games. But I'm saying this, if I was a Bills fan right now, I'm not super confident in what this team is going to do. I'm just not. Will they be competitive? Of course. But I'm not super confident that this team is going to translate into finally breaking their little playoff curse here.
And let me just say this, because I understand exactly how these Bills fans feel when I say this. The New England game hurts.
It does.
The New England game hurts. It's the same way. Feel the same way over here in Jets territory. That New England game hurt.
Yeah.
It's a game you should have won. And look, New England's got 2 wins, both inside the division against teams vying for a playoff spot early in the year.
That dang Belichick, man.
He's still a Hall of Fame coach.
Oh, absolutely. Not as GM, but as a coach. I mean, the dude could do it. Just wait till he gets some real talent in there with a top 5 pick. God, that long slant napper out of Dartmouth is going to be so happy. All right, let's move on to some other games that highlighted the Week 7 schedule, whether unlucky or unlucky, or lucky or unlucky for the point of view of certain people. Justin, going into Week 7, going into the season, Justin, for the highest, I think this is the highest total scoring game of the season so far. We all knew that Browns Colts is going to put up 80 points together, right?
Defensive struggle.
Who would have thought?
Defenses going in. Everyone predicted a 13-16 game.
Yeah, 13-16, maybe like 17-14. No, 39-38. The Browns end up winning this game. It's funny. The Browns technically gave up 38 points, but we could still kind of say the defense won them the game because, man, that defense in critical moments.
There was a defensive touchdown. They had a bunch of sacks.
Yep.
Look, there was one really long touchdown in the beginning for that was for Ford, right? Who scored the touchdown?
Well, the team, so they traded long touchdowns at the start. So Jerome Ford got things off within the first minute. Yeah. So Josh Downs tied the game at 7-7 early with a 59-yarder because before that, Jerome Ford ripped off a 69-yarder. Nice. To get the first score of the game. So you had 7-7 right there. And then things kind of things slowed down from there. Didn't really have too many more like big plays like that for the most part. It just went with them, taking turns on who's going to be able to actually put together drives. The Colts were able to put together a drive at the end in the last 5 minutes of the first quarter to, I almost said period there, thinking hockey in the brain. First quarter there to get a 14-7 lead. Then the Browns took the lead. Then the Colts. Then the Browns were able to build things up to a 30-21 lead based off of defense. Like you mentioned, there was a fumble recovery in the end zone, a couple kicks from Dustin Hopkins. But then the Colts are storming back. Jonathan Taylor with a 5-yard touchdown. Maybe you should use him more, Indy. You exchange a couple field goals. Michael Pittman Jr. with this was the last big play of the game. It was a 75-yarder from Minshew to Pittman, where Pittman just got by everyone. He was gone. That dude, he is a number 1 caliber receiver. I think we've always said that on the show. He's a number 1 caliber receiver, but it's just plays here and there. So he got that. Funny enough, 75-yard touchdown in that, Justin. Yeah. He only finished the game with 83 yards. So
he only had 3 targets.
Yep. 3. Yeah. Oh no, here it says 5 targets. Maybe
3 catches.
No, he had 2 catches.
Whatever.
So, I mean,
the point is he didn't have a lot of catches.
There was a difference of 3 between the catches and targets. So there's the 3. But 2 for 83 for him. Josh Downs had the big game. Of course, he had 5 for 125 and a tutty. Alec Pierce was decent. Jonathan Taylor had over 100 yards from scrimmage. And PJ, like DeShaun Watson, this is where it gets unlucky because while you're Cleveland, yes, you won this game. DeShaun Watson gets hurt in the first quarter. It may have been on the first drive, or maybe not. Maybe it was the second drive more so. It was probably on the second drive.
It was early.
Yeah, I want to say second drive. Dude gets knocked down. Can't really he just can't continue after that. PJ Walker comes in. like is all right, nothing special. 15 of 32 from the former would have been XFL MVP, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Only got sacked twice. Maybe that was one of the big keys there, is that the Browns' offensive line, relatively speaking, kind of held up well. But it was the defense grinding away, and when they were able to get close to things, it went their way. And then, I mean, if you're a Colts fan, this is where the unlucky part comes in, because in the final proper drive of the game, a couple penalties being called on the Colts on the defensive side of the ball, in order to both called on Baker to give the Browns new life, getting them a first down in one instance, and in both instances, but one of them ending up being at first and goal at the one, and they end up getting a touchdown to go. I will say this, for me personally, I needed that one in the SAOC standings. But in all seriousness, a couple calls get made there. Browns are able to punch it in 39-38. Unluckiness on both sides here, Justin. You have the Colts who get unlucky with some of the refereeing, and you get the Browns who get unlucky, who, yes, now they're 4-2, but DeShaun Watson gets injured again. And I don't think he's going to be playing in this upcoming game. I think
I believe they announced that PJ Walker was starting.
Yeah, so you have the Browns, who the $200+ million man is yet again hurt. And you have the Colts, who fall to 3-4, which the Colts have been pretty competitive this year, and I think that would have been big for them if they could have gone to 4-3. All things considered, maybe been a little bit more of a threat in the wild card. They still could. Gardner Minshew, they've actually been putting up points now in recent games. What were your thoughts on this game as a whole from both sides? If you have any more, aside from the fact that how the heck did we see 77 total points?
Well, Gardner Minshew looked excellent. Gardner Minshew looked like he was worth every dime. They knew exactly what they were doing when they signed him to a contract. And the whole Indy offense, I mean, they looked pretty good. There were points where they struggled. They are playing arguably the best defense in the league. But they put up a ton of points. And I understand that part of it was a field position battle because there were some turnovers. They weren't necessarily prepared to play an entire game with PJ Walker. But look, the wild card is wide open right now. The three wild card teams right now are Pittsburgh, who's 4-2, Cleveland, who's 4-2, and Buffalo, who's a game ahead at 5-3. The rest, the teams that are in front of them, Houston, the Jets, and Cincinnati, all 3-3. They're 3-4 now. It's not untenable.
There we go. No, I'm with you. I more so say, because I think if you're Indy, you're getting that momentum. You have a game like this, you feel like you should have gotten it, and it would have been a plus in the win category for you. It would have been a minus for a Browns team who, now there's the uncertainty. And look, have they won the last two games? Absolutely. Have they won it in interesting fashion? Yep. How much more are you going to get away with that? I mean, maybe PJ Walker shows us why he was going to be the XFL MVP in one of these games. But until we see that performance, you kind of have to go with what you've seen so far. And I think if you're Indy, I don't blame Colts fans if they personally think, and I'm sure they think this, that this was a missed opportunity to really, really be even more formidable in the standings. Now, everyone is super close, like you said. The season's not lost. I don't want to make it seem like all doom and gloom, but I think you're allowed to believe that, hey, you would have been 4-3. You would have leapfrogged those three teams that you mentioned right now are 3-3, and you would be above the Browns with a win in hand over them. I think they're I don't blame Colts fans if they feel that there's some missed opportunity in this game, because they could have and probably should have had it. For the Browns here, Justin, really quick before we move on to the next couple games that we can mention here. DeShaun Watson out yet again. We don't know for the discernible period of time. The Browns have been really weird with talking about his injury too. I think Kevin Stefanski, he hasn't necessarily been clear with what the status is with Watson, so we can't really say too much. What do you think about Watson? However much time he's potentially going to miss here over the next few weeks, what does this do for Cleveland, who I know he's not been paid great in any way, shape, or form, but at the end of the day, you paid this guy to be a reason why you're supposed to win. What do you do if you're the Browns in this situation, Justin? How are you going to play this over the next couple of weeks when you deal with DeShaun?
I don't know. I honestly, it's not great. I think I saw a stat that says PJ Walker currently has the same amount of wins in his Browns tenure as a starter than DeShaun does. That's bad, man. I mean, you brought this guy in. You have all the pieces. The defense is ready to go. I know the Nick Chubb injury is a killer. It is. You still got some good play out of Jerome Ford and now Kareem Hunt. And you have players. I mean, Elijah Moore was decent last week. for some reason, Amari Cooper disappeared until the end of the game last week, which, I mean, I guess he put up 30, 39 points. It's not the end of the world, but you'd like to see him get more involved because he's been excellent as of late. You have the pieces, and yet the quarterback that you gave up all these assets for, and all this money to, it's not on the field. And it's tough. And even when he's on the field, I mean, look, he did not look good in that game. He was running for his life.
He's not looked good a lot.
He was a rough catch attempt away from having 2 interceptions in the first quarter. Didn't look great. So I think there's obviously some large concerns when it comes to the quarterback, even when he's on the field. Things have not worked out the way that they wanted to and the way that they thought it would when they traded for DeShaun Watson.
Yep.
And now with all the crap that they've put themselves through and all the assets they gave up and all the money they paid this guy, they need him to start performing better. They
Absolutely.
just do.
Yeah. And especially because you're in a situation where the AFC North is looking to be really the most competitive division in football right now. Like that division is kind of what we were talking about. The AFC West should have been last season. You know, the worst team in that division is 3-3 right now, and maybe we're a Joe Burrow calf strain away from the Bengals being above 500 right now. And you could maybe potentially have all 4 teams being above 500 coming around sort of the midway point of the season. This is the worst part about the NFL being 17 games now. We can't say halfway point of the season anymore because not everyone just plays 8 games. Dang you, NFL.
I don't like that no one could be 500.
Right? Right, man. Jeff Fisher made a career out of being close to or at 500, man. 7-9, Jeff Fisher. God, I miss those days. Someone please hire Jeff Fisher again, please. He probably wouldn't want to come back anyways. So that's true. All right, let's get to a couple of these other games here, just very briefly. So Daniel Jones and Justin Fields are quaking in their cleats for the rest of the season, Justin, because old Tyrod Taylor and old Tyson Bagent. Is that how you say it? Bagent? Yeah, close enough.
He's been there one game. Let's see. If he starts making a little bit of noise, I'll start remembering his name.
Yeah, we'll learn how to say his name. You know, it turns out that the guys who were supposed to be leading the Giants and the Bears to victory turns out were their backup quarterbacks who they did not spend any significant money or draft capital into. 2 very interesting wins to say the least. We'll potentially talk a little bit more about maybe the Giants more so compared to the Bears as the season goes on. We got to give a little bit more there because, I mean, I will say this, Justin, for me personally, Commanders – first 5 games of the season, you know, they had that close overtime loss, against the Eagles. They had the game against the Broncos where they came back from them down double digits. Early on, it looked like the Commanders were going to be a very interesting team to think of. Oh, they could pull off some games here. They could pull off some upsets. It'll be interesting. I know me personally, in my personal picks on my other podcast, I had the Commanders beating the Giants here, and they only put up 7 points. Eric Bieniemy, he had a really great start to the season. Got to start to go a little bit more into this here, buddy. You got to get that offense back together. I know I'm not necessarily putting everything on him. He's just the face of it. But, you know, Sam Howell has been sacked a bunch, Justin. I was actually just seeing earlier. Sam Howell is on pace to be sacked. I think it's over 85, maybe over 90 times this season, which would shatter the record and maybe shatter more of his bones and appendages for the rest of the season if that continues. So Washington really needs to get their act together when it comes to the offense. That has been really great to start the season, but now they're really starting to get rough shot and manhandled along the trenches, specifically on that end. But just brief mentions on those teams. The Falcons beat the Buccaneers. Cool. Arthur Smith, figure out how to use your weapons, please. You have a very talented team, and he doesn't really know how to use all those guys to the best of their capability. So there's that. But, you know, luck wins are luck wins. Shout out to the Falcons defense, though. They're playing gobs above what I thought that they could have potentially played up to. So job well done for them. Seahawks beat the Cardinals 20-10. Not too much to really say. At least for me personally, I don't think there's too much to say. I'm pretty sure this is the last 1 p.m. game of the window, or maybe I kind of delved into the 4 p.m. Seahawks game. But I think one of the more surprising results, Justin, really quick here. Ravens 38. Yeah, Ravens 38, Lions 6.
And it wasn't that close.
It was not. Yeah.
It really wasn't. It was
a 32-point blowout. Could have been more.
It was 38-0 at halftime, wasn't it? No, I think it was 31-0 at halftime. They scored. Mark Andrews scored a second touchdown in the second half, and other than that, it was really there was nothing going on there. I mean, right from the get-go, it was a good old-fashioned shellacking.
Tough to say the very least. So the Ravens proving why they are one of the Ravens are their own little brand of inconsistent here, Justin, because they play down to their competition. But man, do they play up because they destroyed Detroit in this one.
Well, I mean, they made a statement that said Detroit is not. Detroit looks good.
But
They
only
got to
so
win the
good.
games they're supposed to, and that's what they're doing.
And now they're facing one of
Let's not,
the
let's not consider them a top team yet.
exactly, unlike certain people put them number one on lists. I'm not gonna say who, but some people have done that. And they necessarily paid for it. I mean, I remember us going into the season. I know for a fact all three of us picked the Lions winning the division. That
I think
was
you picked the Vikings, actually.
huh?
Maybe I picked the Lions. I thought I picked the Vikings.
I'm going to trust your better judgment and say that you had the Lions. I think that you know Detroit's defense to me was always the biggest question with them. I think the offense can certainly put up points if need be. Not in this game, but generally speaking, they could put up some offense. But to me, the defense was always going to be the big thing. And man, you saw the defense. They couldn't do it against Baltimore. Man, Lamar Jackson just looked like an MVP candidate. Like you mentioned, Mark Andrews had a really good game. Gus Edwards, I think, combined for well over 100 yards from scrimmage. Now that's a little bit inflated because he had the one catch go for 80 yards. But I think if you're Detroit, I think you saw one of the Achilles heels of this team is that the defense, what have I always said so far this season, Justin, I think is going to continue. Detroit's defense, the whole needs to play better than the sum of its parts. This defense needs to be able to play on all three levels on a consistent basis each game. And they've done that, I think, relatively well so far. But I think it's also worth mentioning that who are some of the teams they've done that to? Aside from this Ravens game, the other marquee opponent they definitively faced so far was just week one, I think, against the Lions. Or against the Chiefs, and they beat the Chiefs.
Well, I mean, you could make the argument that the Seahawks, because they lost to the Seahawks.
That's true. That's true. So
And the
let's
Seahawks
add
were a
that.
decent team.
So let's just add the Seahawks. Like you're 1-2 in the marquee games right now, and this is not, to me, this is not a demerit. Like I'm not trying to say anything bad about Detroit here. They're still a pretty good team, but I think you have a Lions team that we're starting to like. We need to go into their future games here with a interesting point of view because now they've had a couple of these losses where the defense just lets up the points in bunches against the likes of the Ravens and the Seahawks. Maybe it's the bird teams that they're struggling against. Maybe. Have the Lions faced the Cardinals yet?
The Lions faced the Cardinals yet.
Does that happen? Does that game happen?
I don't think they have versus the Cardinals. I don't think they do.
Okay.
No.
So, because it's the Ravens and the Seahawks that they've struggled against the most defensively. Maybe it's something about the bird teams that got them. I don't know.
We'll see. Maybe they play the Eagles this year.
Oh, we'll see. But in all seriousness, I think Detroit, this is just one of those come back to reality games of like, hey, you're a good team. You've done what you're supposed to do so far. Here's what a better team looks like, man. And I think that's just one of those lessons. I think if you're Baltimore, can you please just be consistent? We ask you, can you please just a crumb of consistency, Baltimore, because this team lets up the 17 or was 17, 18, whatever, however many straight against the Steelers. You lose to the Colts the way you did. Granted, I know the Colts is weird because they just seem to get at least one AFC upset per season. Usually it's against the Chiefs, but I guess they had to make it the Ravens this year. I think if you're Baltimore, you want to take this game and everything that made you look great in this and continue. And I know that sounds simple, but this is a team that has had, we just talked about Buffalo. Baltimore has its own interesting brand of consistency and inconsistency issues where I just said, I think this is the thing. They play up to their competition. They've played great games against the likes of Buffalo in the past, and they always play the Bengals tight when it's even ground in the Chiefs. Like, Justin, can you think of any time they've been blown out by any of those teams? I can't think of a game off the top of my head over the last couple of seasons where they get blown out when healthy.
No, the issue with the Ravens has always been closing the last few years. I mean, if you look at last year, there was two teams, I believe, in the first 6 games of the season that led by double-digit points in every game. One of them was the Eagles, who were 6-0, and one of them was the Ravens, who were 3-3. If you remember, they had a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter against the Dolphins week 2, and the Dolphins exploded against them. And they had the same issue with the Bills. They had I think it was a 2-point lead with like 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Bills drove down, scored a touchdown, and they couldn't answer.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And I think either before or after that Bills touchdown was a failed 4th down conversion by the Ravens as well.
Yeah, so they haven't looked great this year, but now they're at least closing out games. And I know that they haven't played the best of the best. I mean, the Texans look good, but they are what they are. The Bengals started slow. They lost to the Colts, albeit they were very banged up that week. And they beat the Browns, and they beat the Titans. So I think they're going to need, as they just announced that Jimmy Garoppolo will start Monday night.
There we
Um,
go.
yeah, I think they need to build on this. They do have an easier game as they play the Cardinals this week.
Is it
Uh,
a trap game?
we'll see. It is in Arizona. Um, and look, hopefully they can pull the same performance that they did last week against the Cardinals team who's struggled, believe it or not. And obviously Kyler Murray is doubtful to play. They don't expect him
I don't
on the
think he's
field.
playing that one.
So look, it's a game they should win. Will they play down to their competition again? We'll see.
And Josh Dobbs, he's had some good performances this season.
The Cardinals are not a rollover team. I'm
They're
not
not.
expecting, you never expect a blowout like you did against the Lions, especially against a good team. But the Cardinals are a team that I don't ever expect to be blown out. I think they were blown out in one game this year.
Yeah, I think it's just the 49ers game.
2 games then, because they were blown out in the Cardinals game, and in the Bengals game too.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, Jamar Chase will do that to you sometimes.
Yeah.
Turns out he can be wide open, and he is.
Yes.
Against some teams. So there was that. All right, to finish off that week here really quick, Packers Broncos. I don't really want to say much more about that game aside from Jordan Love. Yet
Can't
another
believe someone won.
reception. Right? they did us dirty. That game should have ended in a tie. But I guess the Broncos get an extra win there to help Russell Wilson's case only further and further to ensure that he doesn't get tossed into a river somewhere by Sean Payton and left for dead. Chiefs Chargers, as expected, close game in the first half. Offensive, well, what I didn't expect was the offenses to necessarily slow down in the second half, but they did, and the Chiefs are able to, stranglehold their way to another victory. Chargers season kind of hanging on by a thread at this point. We might be talking about them in regards to the trade deadline here in a couple moments if they end up doing something, which, I don't know, but we'll see. Primetime games of this week, Justin: Eagles, Dolphins, Sunday Night Football, and Vikings, 49ers, Monday Night Football. Eagles 31-17 victory against the Dolphins. Vikings 22-17 surprise win over the San Francisco 49ers. And Brock Purdy, who, I don't know, was it clear that he got hurt in that game, or did he get hurt the week before and they were just talking about it now? Was it that game he got hurt?
They think that he got a concussion on one of those quarterback sneaks that he made in the fourth quarter. His stats was in the fourth quarter would certainly lend itself to that theory.
Right.
But they don't know when he had a concussion. He is practicing in full, though. They think he will probably start this week.
Oh, okay. That's certainly going to be interesting because I think
still on the protocol list, but they announced it is that he's expected to play.
Okay, so we'll see in that regard. But 2 games right there. Ironically, the losing team in both of them ends up scoring 17. But the Minnesota Vikings with 22 points able to get out the victory there. So that's back-to-back victories for the Vikings.
Don't look now; they're in a wild card spot.
Oh Lord, God, the NFC wildcard is so bad. And then you have the Philadelphia Eagles who get the victory. I think this is the first of the 2 games. We'll hit here real quick, Justin. The Eagles. I think if you're the Eagles, you had that loss against the Jets. You should have been way better. This was kind of one of those, okay, let's get back into form type of games. They weren't necessarily dominant per se. It's funny to say that about a team that ended up totaling 31 points, but I don't think they were necessarily the more dominant team. They just were able to, in certain moments, I think, execute a little bit better. And, that has kind of been an issue for Philly at times. I feel like a lot of people thought they played way more lackadaisical to start this season comparatively. Now, they have a really good record to show for it. That just goes to show that, hey, sometimes talent will get you so far. But I think you agree with it, Justin, is that Jets game was kind of had to be a mini reawakening for them of, okay, we need to be on our P's and Q's a lot more on both sides of the ball if we're going to take games like this. And a Dolphins, a legitimate opponent coming into town like that. There's no slouch by any means of the imagination. Up to that point, the Dolphins only lost to one team there, and it was the Buffalo Bills. But now you hand them their second loss. Feeling good if you're Philly. I more so want to focus on the Dolphins here, just really quick on this discourse, Justin. They only have 2 losses on the season to the Bills and the Eagles. They've handled the rest of their competition. What do you think about people trying to spin the narrative of the Dolphins? Are they a paper 5-2 team? As funny as it is to say that, because the fact that their losses have come against more legitimate teams and their wins have come against the likes of the Patriots, the Panthers, a lighter competition, you could say.
Well, there's something to be said. Obviously, I mean they did beat the Chargers, who are it's in week 1. Uh, but yeah, they really haven't beaten anyone good. If you really look at it, I mean, their only 2 games against winning opponents were the Bills and the Eagles, and lost both of them by a decent amount, multiple scores. So they do play the Patriots this week. I expect them to bounce back. Obviously, good teams try not to lose 2 games in a row, but really the one that's gonna pique everyone's attention is it's gonna be 9:30 a.m. the following week when they go into Germany and have to play the Chiefs, a team that's also arguably the best team or one of the best teams in the league, 6-1, but they've also struggled quite a bit. So it'll be an interesting game to see for sure. Can they beat a team with a winning record? Can they put themselves in the category of, hey, we are a top team in this league and we need to be feared? Or is this, like you said, a paper good team?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily want to put that statement out blanket right now. I think there's still plenty more to be played, of course, but like you said, I think there is something to the fact that the Dolphins, like, and again, you play who you play at the end of the day, right? Like the schedule gets made. Teams just got to play who they got to play. Some people take advantage of weaker schedules. Some people don't. Saints. That's just how it goes. Some people are able to take advantage of the games that are put in front of them, and some teams are just able not to. And I think if you're the Dolphins, if you're Miami, you've executed on a pretty good clip so far this season. In the same sentiment, I do think there is something legitimate to be said, and it is a conversation to have, I think, more internally of like what is happening in these games against these teams like the Bills, like the Eagles, where you're just not able to get it to the necessarily same clip. And like you mentioned, the game in Germany in a couple of weeks against the Kansas City Chiefs. Why is it in Germany, NFL? Why? You have that game is sandwiched in between a bout with the Patriots in Miami and a game against the Vegas Raiders again in Miami. After that, you go to face New York, you face Washington. There's not too many other hyper competitive games if you're the Dolphins, except maybe the last month of the season, give or take, depending on where the Jets going to be by mid-December, because that's one of the games. And then you have 2 of the last 3 games at home, one of them against the Cowboys, the season finale against the Bills, and then the sandwich in between that is an away game against the Baltimore Ravens.
Look, they have, I don't want to say a tough schedule, but I don't want to say an easy schedule either, because realistically,
Yeah.
it's such a middle. They play 4 games against 2 teams with a winning record.
Yep.
They play 4 games against teams with a losing record, and they play 2 games against teams that are currently 500.
Yeah.
It is as middle of the road as you can be. You'll have your chances,
exactly,
but you'll still be a playoff team either way.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't think there's going to be any doubt about that. I just think if you're Miami, it's all about working out the kinks of the offense. And what has led you to the fact that 2 of your lower scoring games this season have been against these 2 teams? How are you going to be able to combat some of these defenses?
Well, look, the issue here is you can't be expected to score 70 points a game. You can't. That defense needs to step up, and they will get Jalen Ramsey back, and they will get players back. But it's not like Tyreek Hill didn't have a long touchdown. It's not like you played one of the better run defenses in the league, sure, and maybe your run game didn't perform as expected, which affected the rest of the offense and blah blah blah. You can't be giving up 30 points to a good
I agree.
team.
Well, I agree. In these 2 games, the defense has certainly not done their job, but also it's 2 of their lowest scoring offensive outputs. I think it's a balance. It's yes, the defense, they've saved their worst games for the best team so far, but it's also like you can't argue. Yes, Tyreek Hill, he's done his job. Tyreek Hill always does his job, it feels. But Tua also doesn't always look at his best when it comes to these games as well. I think there's a little bit of I don't think it's one or the other. I think it is the defense struggles, and Tua, his 2 worst games, I think, this season have been against the Eagles and the Bills. I don't think there's any disagreement there. So
look,
I think it's balance. We were just talking about some teams here. I think Miami is I think they're more offensively leaning. But like you said, they have a chance to be a pretty well-balanced team. And you mentioned this schedule, which I'm with you, I think, because of all the things you mentioned. Like you have 2 games against the Jets, which we'll see what the Jets are like as the season continues to unfold. You have the second game against the Patriots. You got Raiders, Commanders that are thrown in the mix there before you entered the last part of the season. I think their last 3 games are their most 3 difficult. I'll say 4. Their last 4 games are the most difficult.
Mm-hmm.
This next stretch of 6 weeks, if I did the math right there, maybe 6 or 7. I don't know. My Steiner mathematics are off. you have an opportunity here to really flatten out what the issues are. And maybe, like you said, part of it is you're going to get Jalen Ramsey back in the secondary is going to play better. Part of it is like, are Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips going to perform at the higher clip that we were expecting those two pass rushers to be at? It could be that. It could be something that we're just not seeing. I'm not exactly sure what it is.
Well, let me say this. They're very comparable to the other team that lost on the night game last week. And that is, I mean, besides the obvious coaching relations and style of play is obviously a bit different, as one team's more defensive and one team's more offensive. Both teams struggle from behind.
Yep.
They get out to big leads early on, and they like to play with a lead. If you could jump out early on this team, and I know Carolina went up 14-0 against the Dolphins. It didn't make a difference. They're still Carolina. It's not what I'm talking about. But against a good team, against a team that could put up points, against a team that could sustain a lead, these teams struggle. I mean, the Dolphins have had all their success this year because they run the ball. They run the ball well. They were the top rushing team in the league, as well as the top passing team. And guess what? When you played a defensive front like the Eagles and Raheem Mostert didn't have his way, and Jeff Wilson coming off IR had 2 carries for 6 yards, and Ahmed didn't do much, guess what? You didn't have the opportunity to throw the ball because now the box is stacked. They're getting after Tua. There's only so many times that Tyreek can get open down the field and Tua can hit him. Now, all of a sudden, you're not scoring in the second half. Because guess what? They put up 17 points in the first half. They didn't score in the second half. It's a major difference. Brock Purdy listen, he's been a fantastic quarterback for them. He was 10-0. When they have a team has a late lead against them, they're not designed to put up a lot of points in a hurry.
Yeah.
They're
That kind
designed
of
to
goes.
let Christian McCaffrey pick you apart.
Yep.
Brandon Ayuk go over the top, and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle to make devastating shots over the middle.
Yeah. That kind of goes back to the Jimmy G days as well, does it not, Justin? Like, can you think of too many Jimmy Garoppolo fourth quarter comebacks in San Francisco? I know it's unfair to say. I know he was there for a couple seasons, so like
I know that there were some, but I don't think there were like double-digit comebacks.
Right. It was
like maybe they went down 4 points in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, like this is a team. I think you've said it best. These are two teams that you mentioned, the coaching relation, the structural relation. Let's be real here, roster relation. Like the Miami Dolphins' top 2 running backs were the San Francisco 49ers' top 2 running backs, like in relative recent years. So
yeah.
These are two teams that kind of lost in similar ways, realistically. Let's finish this off very quickly about the Minnesota Vikings game. Justin, welcome to the 49ers lost me my 4-point pick club. I didn't get my hat yet for that club. I don't know if you will get yours. Maybe we need to try to figure that out. Maybe we'll make our own little thing here. But the San Francisco 49ers falter. Jordan Addison shows that he can, not just go fast off of the field, but he could go fast on it as well with that touchdown that he was able to get to snap that realistically was like basically a pick. He had to take it back from the defensive back, which is pretty funny. Which the Kirk Cousins effect, ladies and gentlemen. His receivers turn interceptions to touchdowns. Gotta love it. But the Vikings are able to get this upset victory. Again, 2 wins in a row now for them. They're in the wild card race, which feels really weird to say. If you're San Francisco, you have Brock Purdy who gets hurt in the fourth quarter, at least we believe. And you're now entering a period which we're going to wait for the full confirmation. Like you said, they're hoping he's able to get back on track. I saw earlier this week that they're also obviously preparing in case it's Sam Darnold who's going to be the one taking the snaps under center for week 8. So it's going to be interesting to see whichever one of them is going to get it. I think if you're San Francisco, you've lost now 2 games in a row for yourself here. You're entering a week 8 matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals, which is, at least it's at home in San Francisco at Santa Clara, but you're facing a pretty solid team here, man. And I think if you're San Francisco, you've gotten off to such a good start, relatively speaking. The next little stretch here, I don't know when their bye is off the top of my head, Justin, but I think if you're the 49ers, it's about managing things at this point, because what has been their snake bite over years? What has been the Achilles heel with San Fran? It's just injuries, man. Last season, every single quarterback was hurt to the point where Phillip Rivers was ready to play in the Super Bowl for them if they somehow made it that far. Which, again, in a different universe, I would have loved to have seen that game. You have that. You have even years before that. I think there was probably some injury issues on that squad. like George Kittle has dealt with injury issues. Deebo Samuel's dealt with injury issues. Christian McCaffrey, this is a relatively clean bill of health for them. I mean, maybe you enjoyed a beer in one of these weeks, but a clean bill of health for Christian McCaffrey throughout the season for the most part, barring the last couple of weeks of getting slightly nicked up, which, I mean, Carolina Panthers fans know that story all too well. Injury is the number one thing that has kept the San Francisco 49ers from getting back to the Super Bowl. And I think if you're San Francisco, I wouldn't overreact if you're San Fran, Justin. No, let's wait till week 8. But I wouldn't overreact if you're San Francisco. I think the number one thing for them is do all you can to maintain this team. Because at the end of the day, this is a sport of attrition, man. It's whoever enters the playoffs in the best possible shape gives themselves the best possible odds. And if you're San Francisco, I know Brock could be on track to start. I don't know if I'd push him personally to have to come back. I don't know. We're talking about them facing a team that, ironically, maybe they didn't need to push Joe Burrow to play through the calf in the first couple of weeks. Like, you need to, I think if you're San Francisco, you need to be the one to make these decisions. You can't just trust your players to do that. Because I was actually hearing this earlier today. I was just listening to like a podcast. I don't know if it was like a specific podcast host or maybe it was just like a YouTube video that popped in my feed that I just like let play in the background. But the interesting thing I heard was like you sometimes need to take the decision making out of your players' hands when it comes to injuries. Because if it comes to their players, they're going to want to try to play through these injuries as much as possible. Yeah. You need to take this decision out of Brock Purdy's hands. If he's not ready, he doesn't go. Simple as that. Yeah, like Brock Purdy, week 8 in Cincinnati. Would you love to have him in that game? Sure. You want to like have who has been your best possible QB so far this season to play. I want Brock Purdy ready for me in December and January. I don't care about a game in November. I really don't.
Look, if he's not ready, obviously you should sit him. But let's not take away from the important. This is a major game against a major playoff contender over the last couple of years who's coming off a bye week, who's starting to get hot. This is their time of year. They're only going to get better down the stretch. They need to win games. They cannot afford to allow the Eagles to take that big of a lead on the number 1 seed, because let's face it, that's an important advantage. They want to be playing in Santa Clara in January. It's a major. I promise you, it's nicer than playing in Philadelphia.
Oh,
I promise.
I agree.
So
I agree.
The Eagles now have a 1-game lead on them. They could end up with a 2-game lead if they lose to a game like the Bengals, which is a very losable game compared to the Eagles playing, a much more. Well, I don't know about much more winnable game, but a more winnable game this week against the Commanders.
More manageable, I think is how I would describe it.
Yeah. In Washington. Like, I expect the Eagles to win this week. I don't know who I expect, even with Purdy. I don't know if I expect them to beat the Bengals.
Right.
They just lost to the Browns and the Vikings.
And you're honestly, look, all due respect to old primetime Kirk Cousins or Jordan Addison, this is a better quarterback than you faced a lot in those 2 losses. This is a better number 1 wide receiver than you faced in those 2 losses. This isn't the best coach you faced compared to those a couple of losses, but this is a guy that Zach Taylor, Kevin Stefanski, and Kevin O'Connell, offense is their thing, man. Relatively speaking, like it's funny. It's similar coaches, which all stem from like one of the same 2 trees. But this is the most talented team they're facing in the last 3 weeks, and they lost to the most recent 2. Like, I am with you. Like, if he's healthy, play him, sure. But I think we've also seen the last couple seasons. It's a very tricky game when it comes to concussions and QBs and just players in general. So
absolutely, like I said, I'm not saying don't take the player's health into consideration. I'm saying that this is an important game,
right?
And I'm not resting him just to get him an extra week of rest.
Right. If he could play, he could play. Absolutely. Exactly. But if he can't play, don't do it. Don't do it. So there's our medical advice for San Francisco for free. You could always hire us as well. We'll gladly take whatever monetary amount to be.
Any money you want to throw at me, I'll take.
We will become the official San Francisco 49ers podcast. Any team's podcast, really, for the most part, except I think for the Patriots. I don't know if Rick will allow that, and Justin. But aside from that, this podcast is for sale for any team, ladies and gentlemen, just for the record there. All right. So, Justin, it's funny that you bring up how critical that game is. So let's talk about another reason why some of these Week 8 games could be important, and maybe even what the Week 7 games were, is that the NFL trade deadline, as I mentioned towards the top, is coming up right here. It happened on Halloween, 4 p.m. That is the deadline. So we're going to see a number of teams, over the next, 48, 72 hours, either make moves or stand pat. And last season, Justin, we were actually, like I had mentioned at the top, we were talking about this pre-show, is that you look at some of the trades that happened at last year's deadline and how interesting it was in all relativeness. You had the Miami Dolphins splurge on a couple moves with getting Bradley Chubb as the main one there, and they also got Jeff Wilson from San Francisco this time last year. The Eagles beefed up a little bit slightly with Robert Quinn. You had TJ Hawkinson traded from the Lions to the Vikings. You had the Kansas City Chiefs. They got Kadarius Toney around this time last year. So around/on the trade deadline, Roquan Smith was traded from the Bears over to the Ravens, which then I think I forget if it was before or after that, you then had the Bears trade for Chase Claypool, which that was something. But last season was active in terms of, relatively speaking, some semi-notable names were moved. But I think the more interesting thing, Justin, was just the fact that there was like this definitive conversation of, hey, teams are looking to be active at last year's deadline. We're not necessarily getting the same thing of it. We're hearing ideas and rumors per se, which, I mean, there's always going to be ideas or rumors around all sports trade deadlines. But it doesn't feel the same way that last year's did. And I know we agreed on this in the pre-show, Justin. So real quick, before we talk about some of the potential names that could be dealt, your gut feeling at this moment, do you think the next 48, 72 hours, is it going to be that active for the league? Or do you think like maybe a trade or two here and there, but for the most part, nothing like big? And I don't mean big like star big. I'm talking about maybe in terms of more volume like we had last year. Do you have a gut feeling that we're going to get more or less than that?
I don't know if we'll have the same kind of thing with last year. I mean, there's a lot of names that are being brought up now. Obviously, the running backs who were center stage in the offseason with issues and things like that are being brought up again. But I see. The thing is, the trades last year, they weren't huge name wise, they were huge impact wise. I mean, it's not like they were nobodies. I mean, TJ Hawkinson was a major trade for the Minnesota Vikings. Roquan Smith was a major trade for the Ravens. There was volume there. But I mean, I don't think we're going to see any like superstars or anything on the move. The biggest name I'm hearing, as a pure rumor, is Derrick Henry, who's on a tough tough Tennessee Titans team, who's expected to start a rookie, by the way, this week in Will Levis. He could be on the move. There's been a couple of teams that have been linked to him. Dalvin Cook is another name that has not been happy with his target share or his workload share with the Jets. He might be on the move. There's a little bit here and a little bit there. I'm not sure exactly what you're going to see. I don't remember if there was traction at this point last year or if it was more after the games of the following week, but we'll see.
Yeah, we will. I think around this time, some of the trades were made, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm just like, and again, this is me going back to what was last year. So it's kind of hard because not necessarily all the dates are on this. So that doesn't necessarily help. But some stuff happened around this time. So like on this date last year, the 49ers were at least listening to the Jeff Wilson offers, which I believe he gets dealt a day or two later. On last year, the 27th, that's when Kadarius Toney was traded. Robert Quinn was acquired just before that.
The McCaffrey trade was last year, right?
Yes, it was, but I think it was even before the trade deadline.
It was earlier.
It was earlier.
Before.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely. It was. I like early mid-October compared to the rest of this. So I just think like that. That's why I mentioned. Oh, actually, there's the perfect date right here on October 20th last year. Hey, my birthday last year. So it was a birthday gift for me to see a good running back actually go to a good team. So maybe it'll be a late gift as well this year. But I think ultimately speaking, there was more of a feeling last year that trades were going to happen, even at this time. Whereas it just kind of feels like murmurs right now. Nothing big. And I mean, maybe that's just the NFL being a business where it's like, yeah, you don't need to have it telegraphed to you that these guys are going to get moved. It probably still could happen, which look, I'm hopeful for it. It's more fun when there are transactions. It gives us more to talk about on this podcast and other podcasts as well. We could talk about trades occurring. It's better for podcasts, sports content as a whole, when we actually get to talk about the things that have happened rather than just speculate all the time on things that could happen. So, just a little nudge there, NFL. But Justin, real quick, let's talk about a good chunk of the names that could be traded. Will they or will they not be traded? That's a different discussion. So you brought it up with all the running backs who could end up being dealt. Dalvin Cook, of course, is a name mentioned. I don't know if they will do it But I mean, Saquon just has a year left. If anyone would make an offer for him, he's already been injured. I don't think that would happen. But had he stayed healthy, maybe, and if they were still this bad. But let's focus in on the first running back that you discussed there, Justin. Let's talk about Derrick Henry real quick and his teammate on that team that literally just signed to Tennessee this season, DeAndre Hopkins. Those are two guys that are going to be brought up into the conversation. I've seen a couple articles stating that D-Hop couldn't end up being dealt because it was just a 2-year deal. Next season, Tennessee could eat some of the money now. So it's very manageable, especially considering Ryan Tannehill's in the last year of this deal. What it is that Tennessee has the flexibility to move on from both of these guys for all intents and purposes. So do you think that both DeAndre Hopkins and Derrick Henry will end up getting traded at this deadline?
Should they? Yes. But when you're talking about players of this magnitude, it's hard to get correct value. And are they willing to take a little bit of a hit to get back assets that might help them in the future? And I'm not sure about this. I mean, this is the first time we're seeing this GM now in the work. I forget his name, but I know that they signed him last offseason. And there's going to be some major differences in this next offseason. So if they're not traded before the trade deadline, I could see them being traded in the offseason where they might be able to get a little bit more value for them. That being said, I mean, there are some major teams that could use the help in both receiver and running back. It's all about shifting the money around and who's willing to give up what. But I could see at least one of them.
Right.
I don't know if both of them go.
Right. And Rand Carthen is the Titans, as you said, new GM. He was only hired literally earlier this year, back in January, after what was a disappointing season for the Titans. Amazing for me, but disappointing season for the Titans in 2022. He was the 49ers influence, man. He was in the 49ers organizations for 6 seasons, including 2 years there as the director of player personnel. So, and like you mentioned, this is all about, stamping the roster as he sees fit. And I think with Ryan Tannehill, this being, I think, the last season of his contract, DeAndre Hopkins was just for a 2-year deal. I think a 2-year deal, keeping in mind that it probably wasn't going to be too much for the long haul there for a situation like this. And now Derrick Henry, like you said, it's different conversations between will it happen versus should it happen. Absolutely, I think the two of them should end up getting dealt. I think between the two of them, the safer bet to get back the most value now, to me, is Derrick Henry, Justin. Kind of like you mentioned, he has the longer track record the last couple of seasons. Yes, he got dinged up last year, but I think most people would be confident they could bring Derrick Henry in. They could maybe go on a run. And it's not you don't have to necessarily pay him. It would be nice if you trade for someone and you end up, keeping them for more than just half a season, but you don't necessarily need to pay him the big bucks after. Whereas DeAndre Hopkins, last couple seasons, was a little bit more of struggling. I think teams will call about Hopkins. You mentioned value. I think the ultimate game here will be, will Rand Carthen, will he believe that the best DeAndre Hopkins trade happens now, or would he be willing to take that gamble and wait into the offseason? 50-50, like you said. And maybe some of these guys that we're mentioning, depending on how many years are left on their deals, it could wait till the offseason. Sometimes trades don't get done when we think they're going to happen. Sometimes they happen much later on, and you don't really get the same type of value back for them. That happens in other sports all the time too. Lillard. Anyways, but this is a guy that already has been willing to make a trade, as he, within the last week or so, they traded Kevin Byard from their team over to Philly, and honestly didn't really get a lot back. I think they got a player who, all due respect, I'm forgetting the player's name off the top of my head, and they got a 5th and 6th round pick for a safety who is relatively successful. He's made, I think, the Pro Bowl a couple times, at least 1 or 2 All Pros under his belt. And you didn't really get a lot back. Maybe are we dealing with a guy that's just willing to clean house here? We were mentioning value. Is he just going to be willing to just cut these guys? I think Derrick Henry will be where the bulk of the value is. But for DeAndre Hopkins, do you think if he gets a call and it's just a 3rd for D-Hop and Tennessee has to eat the money, or even a 4th, could that probably get the deal done? Maybe like a 3rd and a 6th, or a 4th and a 5th, considering what they just traded Byard for? I think that's something that we could see happen.
Well, with the contracts the way they are, they might have to accept a little bit less value as well, because these guys are owed a decent amount of money, and for you to be able to fit them under the caps, fit them under a team that has very little cap space, they're going to have to give up certain players. So you might not get the draft assets that you're thinking that you're going to get.
Yeah. And that's what it is at the end of the day. But I mean, you don't always get a bunch of trade assets back in these trades a lot of time. Think of the Christian McCaffrey deal last season. I think it was just a multitude of it was 2/3, a 4th, a 5th.
There was a 2nd in there. Yeah, look, they got decent draft capital, but
I think it was more the bulk of it that was the
Yeah.
sweetener for Carolina. They got a bulk of picks compared to, like, they were never going to get the one definitive pick, right? But it was a multitude of picks that maybe they could use in a trade down the line, or they just ultimately, are cool with using it and they try to fill out the roster as is, and you just rely on your scouting staff, which, well, and also not having a meddlesome owner helps, but, sorry, Carolina. Those rumors are wild, to say the very least. It turns out the Panthers were actually listening to our podcast, Justin. They were probably going to get C.J. Stroud, but, Dave Tepper forced their hand for Bryce Young. So, I mean, thank you, Carolina, for being fans of the show. We actually do appreciate that. Well, except Dave Tepper. Anyways, let's go to another team here. Not necessarily reading off one of the lists that I've tried to find here, but more so, this is just a team that we know have been in rumors for weeks, Justin. I think we probably mentioned them 2 weeks ago when it came to the trade deadline. The Denver Broncos have at least 2 guys that we know could get down. Let's be real here, maybe 3. Justin Simmons on the defensive side of things, the safety, who's been there for quite a while, a Broncos lifer so far. He could end up being dealt. I'm sure some teams would very much like a safety. If we saw Kevin Byard get dealt, I think we could definitely see Justin Simmons get moved here. And now you have the 2 wide receivers who are going to be very much mentioned, Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, both definitively on the block. The future of those 3 guys, Justin, it's going to be based off of, do you think George Patton will make those moves? He's shown that he's willing to make trades at the deadline and sell off. He traded Bradley Chubb last year. The year before that, he traded Von Miller. So you actually have a GM here that is willing to make these trades. And I think that's the big thing for maybe some of the teams we might talk about here, like some of these players and ideal teams that could want to look at these guys, Justin, because you kind of, one thing that I try to do more now as I've, just accrued more and listened to more podcasts is that you need to kind of key into what patterns general managers do. Broncos GM George Patton has been willing to make trades at the deadline and sell off pieces. So because of that, especially with the defensive guys, I think Justin Simmons to me is the guy where it's like, yeah, he's probably going to end up getting traded. And I could very much see that scenario happening. No reason really to keep him, all due respect, even if you think you could be better next season. This keeping Justin Simmons for yet another year on the hope that you are going to be coming along and being better next year, is that worth keeping? I don't know. So I think Simmons would get dealt. I think Jerry Jeudy, I think his time in Denver is over. I just don't think there's any juice left to squeeze there if you're the Broncos. I think Cortland Sutton to me is the question because there's only so much offensive talent you could trade. Yes, you have Marvin Mims, who's been good so far, but are you willing to just completely let out the cupboard and just be barren at the wide receiver spot now? I don't think both of them get dealt. I think one of them is kept because I don't think going into next season with just Marvin Mims is the play. So what do you think about the future of the Broncos as, particularly centered around those 3 pieces?
Well, the question here is, where do you view yourselves? Do you view yourself as an unlucky team who was in a bunch of close games and things could have gone either way, and unfortunately they split wrong for you, and you're going to stick with your guys? Or is this a team that's ready to start a fresh rebuild? And I know you have Russell Wilson, who's obviously going to be on the team next year no matter what, but are you going to draft a quarterback? And that's really what it comes down to. If you're going to draft a quarterback, to me, any veterans on a short-term contract owed a lot of money might not be there next year. I might be selling off assets. If you're going to go rebuild, go full rebuild. To me, I know they said that they don't really want to listen to trades for certain players, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But if you have good players and you think you can get top quality picks and personnel back, you need to get in the best possible replacements now. They're in last place in the AFC right now, according to ESPN. They need to find a way to reverse this ship because things are not going well in Denver.
Ship for the people, just in case anyone may have misheard. Ship P. No swear jar this week, people. Don't even.
Brock Purdy has just cleared concussion protocol and has no injury designation going into the game.
There we go. So that'll help us when it comes to the pick challenge later on in this episode, and we'll make San Francisco 49ers fans feel a whole heck of a lot better. Yeah, I'm with you, Justin. I've always been one to say that, man, being mid or being even really good is not enough for me, or being not really good, I should say, just being good. You got to pick a side. You either got to try to go all in on being good, or you got to read the writing on the wall and you got to just, completely reset things. And I think if you're the Broncos, you have a chance here to get assets back. And I think if you're Denver, don't forget the fact that the last couple of years you've given up a lot of assets to try to get to this point. And why not restock the cupboard, get some more young talent in there? Because I think, relatively speaking, I know we need to let things play out, but Marvin Mims was a good pick in this past draft. Like, he's a good pick. I think there are some players on this team. We were mentioning this a couple weeks ago. I think Rick was maybe pointing out that the two guys that lead the Broncos in sacks right now, I think they're both like, 26 and under in terms of age. Like, you can find guys if you trust your scouting department, with later picks. You can do that. And I think if you're Denver, you just need to give yourself a shot at that. Because to me, at the end of the day, would you rather let Jerry Jeudy walk in some random hope that you're going to be better either to end this season or even next year if you think you keep him? Or would you take the risk of, hey, I'm going to find a Jerry Jeudy in this next draft class? And Jerry Judy's not a player that has proven to be special enough so far for you.
I was going to say, are you looking for a Jerry Jeudy?
No, I know, but I more so mean like maybe I don't know if it's the skill set that they wish could have worked, or I don't know, production. Well, I think production.
So the question really is what do you value him as? Because it's not like he's been setting the world on fire for 4 years now. He's had a lot of injuries. He's been an up and down player. As Steve Smith Sr. said, he's just a guy.
Yeah.
So what are you valuing? Are you okay getting a 3rd round pick for him?
I think if you get a 3rd round pick, that would be great.
Are you okay getting a 4th round pick for him?
I think that's more it. I think you're closer to like a 4th and a 6th in a package for Jerry Jeudy compared to a 3rd.
So he's still a young player on a rookie contract, and where is his value? And are you okay with giving up on a 1st round pick that hasn't really worked out for less value? The sunk cost fallacy is a major player in a lot of these deals. Are you willing? What is this guy worth to you, and are you willing to give up less to move on?
But like you say, willing to give up less, or also just willing to not get anything back, and he just walks. I don't think Jerry Jeudy's a Bronco after this season, even if they keep him. I don't think there's any reason to keep him in the organization. I just don't. So, like, he hasn't performed. He doesn't necessarily like give off like the potential that we thought for a brief period of time he would have had. And I think if you are Denver, I know you mentioned sunk cost fallacy and all that. I think you got to wait, honestly, if you are the Broncos here. Excuse me. I think you need to wait in terms of, I keep saying wait as if like wait. No, I mean weigh. My bad. You need to weigh everything in consideration, like you've said. I think you need to just weigh the fact that you got to get something back, man. You got to.
But the thing is, it's a lot of these players across the board. So, I mean, not so much on defense, but like Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton has not been the picture of consistency there. He's had a couple of good games. He's also had a ton of injuries. Is Courtland Sutton worth a 4th round pick to you?
I think teams will pay more for Sutton than they will for Jeudy.
Do you think they're really going to give up that much more? I mean, look, Sutton's played a little bit better. But again, he's a guy with a worse injury history. He's had more major injuries than Jeudy has. He's older. He's owed more money. What are you giving up for a guy like that?
In response, though, I think other teams will weigh it in as well. He has more of a track record of actually doing something in this league.
It's really not that much, though.
It's still more than Jeudy. But this is the thing with Denver. Justin, this is the thing with Denver is that you like we've seen trades where it's like guys get traded for more or less than we think. This could very much end up being the case with the Broncos, where you have this idea for what you want to trade guys for. Like you're going to have to accept something.
With the Broncos, I think it's clear that they're not getting more. This is the reason that these guys have not been traded. It's not like they're just bad, surprisingly, this year. They have been bad for a number of years now, and they have been bad with these guys on the team. And every time they get a new quarterback or a new coordinator or a new this or a new that, everyone says, "Oh, this guy's gonna thrive now. He's gonna turn things around. He's gonna get better." And it hasn't happened. And it doesn't matter if it's Courtland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy or even Javonte Williams or any of these guys. These guys have not panned out offensively. Yeah. So what is your value of these guys? If you think that they're going to get overpaid for, fine. But I don't see it. Clearly, they've been saying, "Oh, we don't like the value that we're getting." There's been trade rumors for 2 years now about these guys. There's no value for guys on a bad team that are likely going to get cut or be on different teams. Why even give up assets if I could take a run at signing the guy for less money and give up no draft picks?
Well, I think teams have kind of shown they would be willing to trade for a guy if they can get it for what they want. But that's also dealing with Pat.
My point is that Denver is not getting what they want, which is why they're not trading.
And this is what bad GMs do. They hold on to guys and don't get anything back. I think maybe not bad GM, but I think bad GM habits are not getting value back and just letting guys go. Like, to me, Jerry Jeudy, I would rather take. And you mentioned what is we value. We don't know how the rest of the league values them. What the heck is Denver valuing them at? Like, I'm sorry, you're not gonna get. Like, I think a 3rd round pick would be a steal for Jerry Jeudy. You're not getting any more back than that. I think for Cortland Sutton, I think you could convince a team to. I think you could get a 2nd round pick for Cortland Sutton in a deal. I think you can get a team to pay that. But do you want more for that if you're Denver?
At
The answer is no.
In the last year and a half, the rumors were the Broncos are looking for a 1. The Broncos are looking for a package. They want a player and a 2nd.
But that's
their value has continuously plummeted.
No, I agree.
What are you getting?
That value has plummeted from there, like from those previous rumors. I think, like, what is the value now? I think Jerry Jeudy is a mid-round pick. I think Cortland Sutton is maybe higher than that, and I think Justin Simmons is probably the best of those 3 easily. I think Justin Simmons, you could maybe convince someone for a 1st, or closer to the Christian McCaffrey package of a 2nd plus.
I don't think they're getting any 1st-round picks for these guys.
No, no, I'm saying Simmons would be the closest of those 3.
No, I know. I'm saying I'm not saying I don't disagree. I don't agree with you. I'm just saying I don't think you're getting that much. And if this is the value you're having it as, I don't think teams are willing to give up that much value for guys on bad, not even top players on bad teams. It's not like these guys are lighting it up.
But so what I'm saying, Justin, I'm not saying is that other teams should value them the same way Broncos. No. I'm saying the other teams have their offers. If you're Denver, you need to accept what you're going to be dealing with here. You need to accept that if you're Patton. And if you're going to be willing to let Jeudy go and Sutton and Simmons are going to be just another year older at the end of this year going into next year, when it's not a guarantee, this is what I was talking about, weighing it in. Not waiting, weighing it in. You need to weigh in everything. You need to get a little bit of the realism in you. And you just got to accept the fact that, like, everyone wants something, right? Like, if you, I understand George Patton. I want a 1st-round pick in trades back for both Cortland Sutton and for Justin Simmons. Okay, cool, awesome, man. And I want to be able to go on a date with like Florence Pugh or Haley Steinfeld. Guess what's not happening? It's not happening. You got to be realistic, bro. You got to be realistic. And if you're the Denver Broncos, you need to ultimately look at what you have, deal with the negotiations, and if you guess something, you guess something. You kind of have to accept that. And again, I think you have more of a case with Simmons to maybe negotiate a better package. I think with Cortland Sutton, I said Simmons or Sutton just now, my bad. I think Simmons, my bad if I said Sutton. I think Simmons, you have the best chance to get the best all-around package. I think Sutton, between your 2 skill position players, you have the better chance of getting an individual pick. And then with Jerry Jeudy, you just get whatever. Like, that's kind of what you have to do. All right, let's step off the Broncos here. We've talked way too long for that team. I say I don't want to talk about Russell Wilson all that much longer, but next week, ladies and gentlemen, don't you worry in case you're upset with me that I haven't paid off the challenge. I don't know if there's a working Subways near me, but next week I will be eating the Danger Witch live on the podcast. That'll either increase or tank ratings. We'll see which one it does ultimately. I know Justin and Rick have been waiting on that one as well. I also have a see, I don't know if I'll do it because Rick was talking about how if I was going to go 0 for 4, I would have had to have a second Danger Witch. Let me make this very, very clear. I'm doing a different I'm not doing the same thing if I go 0 4 again. I ain't eating 2 Danger Witches this season, so you two could both shove it. But I do have a different penalty for me to do if I were to go 0 4.
What if you like the Danger Witch, Jared? Come on.
I don't care. I'm still not having I'm not going to willingly eat Subways 2 times for punishments in the NFL. So look. I actually like Subways like more than most people. I ain't doing it. So there's that. Oh, nice. So ultimately, that's not happening. All right, let's go to a couple other teams here. Let me actually stay in the division real quick because the Raiders, Justin, just very, very quickly here. Devontae Adams, we know, is unhappy, but I don't think he's going to end up being traded now. This is a guy I think is the example of the offseason is probably more going to be the time. I just think if you're Vegas, I don't think they'd be willing to trade him. I think they're probably going to wait. What I would say is maybe more so, and this guy's been brought up in the rumors this season, Justin. I don't know maybe how much you've heard of traction for his name. Hunter Renfrow has been someone that, he had the one really, really good season a couple years back. I think in the last year of the I think it was the year that Derek Carr and them made the playoffs, right? That Hunter Renfrow was pretty good that season because I think Darren Waller was a little bit dinged up during the year.
Correct.
And they extended him. It was, I think, just a 2-year deal, so it wasn't for long term. And I haven't really heard much of him over the last couple of seasons, man. So Do you think, yes or no, just very quickly, do you think Hunter Renfrow is going to be dealt at this trade deadline?
It's hard to say yes or no. I think he probably should. Obviously, he's lost his positioning there. But will they trade him? I mean, the Raiders aren't really known for doing what's best for their players. So
Very true. Very true. But I mean, could it also be just best for a team? Because like you mentioned, they
the
signed some
Raiders
wide
aren't really known
receivers.
for doing what's best for their team either.
You know what? Bishop to Rook 9. You got me on that one, man.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think Renfrow could be dealt because you mentioned him kind of losing his spot on the team. Like, he had his role refined in the offense, and he doesn't really have it anymore. Like, he was at one point, he was supposed to be the number 2 guy behind Devontae. That didn't really pan out last season. Then maybe, Renfrow at worst could be your slot guy. That kind of hasn't worked out with the way that the offense is going and how Josh McDaniels is schemed up. Like, if you're going to have a guy there, like, there's no reason to keep him if you're not going to use him. I don't understand keeping guys if you're not going to play them or use them or to the best of their ability. So I think if you're Vegas, like, I think this is just an example where you could trade a guy, and I think you could still get something decent back for him. I think there's a number of teams higher up in the standings that, they could use the caliber of a player of a Hunter Renfrow. They could use some more consistency on the offensive side of the ball to get a guy who, look, he's a solid player. He's nothing special. A lot of people are really overhyping him up, I think, going into 2022. I never saw Hunter Renfrow as the caliber player that maybe some other people did, but I think he's a fine player. I think he's good, crisp, clean route running. I think reliable hands for the most part. He's a good player. Like, we were talking about what the value could be for the Broncos players. I think Hunter Renfrow is certainly a player you could get some good value back for. Maybe like a second and a fourth or a second and a fifth. He has shown that he is not just like he can put up the numbers, but he's reliable. I think more so even compared to the other guys, because I don't think it's necessarily been injury issues throughout his career in Vegas. I think it's more, and I think he did get hurt maybe last season, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it's necessarily injury problems with Hunter Renfrow. I just think it's more so McDaniels just doesn't know what the heck he's doing with the guy. And maybe that's how you take advantage of Vegas in a trade. But I think Hunter Renfrow could certainly be dealt at this deadline to the right team for the right price. And hopefully it would be a team that would ultimately know how to use them. So that I think that would be the number one thing for that regard. But yeah, I think Hunter Renfrow could get dealt. Devontae Adams, I don't think is anything to, like, I don't think it would happen now. I actually did see, I don't know if the quote was, I was probably late, like, in terms of when it happened, but I saw a quote saying that he's not happy because he wanted to go to Vegas to play with Derek Carr. Now Derek Carr's not there. It's just unraveling at the seams for the Raiders there, Justin, and just I don't really know what else to say about them other than, man, Josh McDaniels just really knows how to ruin things, eh?
Things aren't doing great.
Things are not going great, to say the very least. Okay, let's skip from not skip, but let's move on from the offense. We've mentioned running backs and wide receivers. There was one quarterback that at a period of time we probably thought could have potentially get dealt, but considering the team's in the wild card race now, and the quarterback said before last game that he didn't want to get dealt, that is not happening either. I'll just say right off the bat, I would have loved to see Kirk Cousins get traded to the Atlanta Falcons. I thought that would have been cool. And him with Kyle Pitts and Drake London and Bijan Robinson, I think would have been interesting, but that dream's dead. So thanks, Minnesota. Thanks, Kirk. Thanks, San Fran, for blowing that game. But moving on from that, Justin, let's talk about some defensive players here when it comes to that side of the ball. So Washington, Rick's formerly beloved Commanders here, Justin. Really quick, Chase Young is someone who, even going into the season, we were hearing rumors about him being dealt. The former second overall pick had a great rookie season, has dealt with so much the last 2 years in terms of injuries. He hasn't necessarily been, he's definitely not been laying the world on fire in any way, shape, or form, to say the very least. But, he's going to be brought up again. Montez Sweat, I think, is also a guy to bring up in with Washington because he's an impending free agent. And if you're going to trade someone, I mean, be one of those two, if not even both. What are, in terms of the shakeup on the defensive line, which really 2 years ago, man, there was so much hope going into the Commanders just in terms of what that defensive line could have been. You saw, I think it was Jonathan Allen. He was super frustrated after the loss against the Giants, saying he was sick of everything. He added an expletive in there, but of course, this is a children's show, ladies and gentlemen. And I think that if you're Washington, I think you could definitely stand to see it. Look, yeah, they're close, relatively speaking, in the wild card race. They've been competitive in games, but you mentioned it, Justin. making the evaluation of your team, I don't think you're going to go too far this year if you're Washington. And why not get something back for one, if not maybe both of these guys that may not be on the team next year? Quick question for you, and you can continue. Has Chase Young and Montez Sweat proven anything that they should be Commanders next season, or that they even will be? And then second part of that, do you think that now is the time that now would have to be the time? Do you think they do get traded by Halloween?
I think they do, actually. I think that there's only so much playing time you can have for some of these guys, and you're cutting into some of their talents, I think, by keeping all of those guys along the defensive line. That being said, I mean, that's the strength of that team. I mean, that's the one thing that they've always had working well. Obviously, you'd like a little bit more production maybe with your sack numbers, but they get after the quarterback. They've played well along that defensive line, and it's really been what's kept them in a lot of games because the secondary has not been what they've hoped to be, even with the numerous draft picks that they've put back there. So it's an interesting situation. I think one of them will get dealt, especially because I think that there's actually a lot of room for negotiation in there, especially with guys that have not played so much.
Right, and I think if you're Washington, it's again you're a fine team, you're a decent team, you're in theory in the competition, but you just have two guys there that I think you can get something back for, man. And like you said, at the end of the day, yes, while it was a strength of their defense for the longest time, it's also underperformed at times. Like there have been times where that defense as a whole, especially that front four, just weren't able to do their job. And I think if you're Washington, you need to. Maybe this is just my personal philosophy when I see things. I think in a case of that, you need to get what you can back. You can't keep everyone. And I think in a case where I don't think either of these guys are long to be Commanders past this season, then again, I'm hoping that they won't be the Commanders for too long. Let's go Red Wolves. I think you need to get something back for these players. And again, is this me hoping we just get a bunch of trades here last second so we can talk about it? Absolutely. But I think if you're Washington, I think at least one of these two is going to get dealt. If I had to actually pick one over the other, I think Montez Sweat is more likely to get traded now because I think you've seen a little bit more from him on a consistent basis. I think Chase Young just has not been able to recapture the magic from his rookie season, man. And I think also this wasn't from Pro Football Focus, but I'm assuming the stat in and of itself is. But I think in terms of like pass rush win rate, I think Montez Sweat's is much better than Chase Young's has been this season, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Montez Sweat is the guy that you could get more back for comparatively. But yeah, I think a disassembling of Washington's what at one point was supposed to be a very fierce front four for them is in the cards. At some point, the experiments just don't work. They don't play out the way that you thought they were, and you need to just cut the losses, accept it, and you go from there. And I think Washington has a chance to at least get a little something back. It's not going to be revolutionizing, obviously, but it's trading pieces that at the end of the day, maybe it's best that they get traded. Like Washington, for all the good that has been happening over the last several months, obviously new ownership, things seem to be a little bit more consistent. There's still a little bit more turnover to happen there, man. Like, yes, was Dan Snyder an absolute buffoon? Of course. But now that you have cleansed that toxicity out of the front office aspect of the team, and I think maybe management-wise, they're trying to stabilize everything, you need to focus on the field product. And I think getting rid of pieces of an old era that just need to go away, I think that's part of it. And I don't, again, difference between what will and should happen, I think both should be gone. I think you agree, but I think we both agree one of them will be gone. So there's the matter. And I know I said Montez Sweat, my bad, I may have missed yours. Did you say Young or Sweat is more likely who you thought was going to be dealt?
I didn't.
Oh, thank you, Justin. Do you want to take a guess or just?
I think Young will be dealt.
Okay.
I think Young has a name. He hasn't played as well. He's got a little bit less production as of late. And I think for some reason, because of that name and where he was drafted, you might actually get a little more for him.
Okay. So Justin goes with the younger player. I'm going with the savvy veteran in that regard. So the two of them are obviously up there. Another defensive guy that I'm just seeing on one of these lists, because Justin, we all love lists of guys that could be dealt. This is kind of a more interesting one, but I feel like I may have made mention to this in talking about them in the preseason, but the Green Bay Packers, Justin, really quick here. Preston Smith is a guy in one of these articles I'm seeing could be a candidate that maybe the Packers would hear on. I haven't read any extra reports and rumors since then, but I think if you're Green Bay, you have a front four that is highlighted by Rashawn Gary, who got his contract extension, Lucas Van Ness, who you recently brought to town with a first-round pick. I could see a world where Preston Smith does get dealt. I just don't know. See, again, this is where I go back to what I'm trying to do as my new learning philosophy and trying to figure out what general managers do here, Justin. The Packers have proven they're not necessarily a team that really does anything at the deadline, both in terms of trading for or trading away pieces. I don't think Preston Smith is going to get dealt, but that could just be me personally. What do you think about? Again, this is one of those. I'm seeing it off of a list. I haven't seen too many rumors aside from the reasoning, which I think is sound reasoning. But what do you think? Do you think Preston Smith is getting dealt from Green Bay?
I don't know. I think there's more there to build on. I think that you might see them draft a quarterback and sign Jordan Love to a long-term deal. Not super long, maybe 2-3 years, so he can try and develop a little bit, and they're going to hold on to those defensive pieces as long as possible.
Yeah. And the way that you can win with a young quarterback, whether it ends up being Jordan Love or, like you said, probably most likely drafting a guy in this next draft, is to be able to put the pieces around them to support them and to win games where it doesn't necessarily need to be all on them. And Preston Smith can certainly help with that. I don't know the status of his contract. I think he might have one more year after this, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't think it necessarily makes sense to trade him. I just think he's one of the, again, we see him as a name. I think it's worth mentioning, but probably not going to be dealt. I think Danielle Hunter would have been in the conversation here had it not been for the fact that the Vikings are looking decent right now. There was the issues going into the season. I think this is probably something that more is going to be handled, at least in the back half of the season. I mean, Ian Rappaport has said that, at least as of now, as of a couple of days ago, the Vikings are still taking calls on Danielle Hunter. So maybe this is something that on a latest update, maybe they've closed the door on that if they're going to try to push for the playoffs, or they would be willing to trade him. What do you think about that, Justin?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough.
I know why you're saying that. It's tough to say because on one hand, it's the Minnesota Vikings. They're in the wild card hunt, right? They could, in theory, be competitive. They could, in theory, go on a run. Maybe they'll be better as a 7th seed more than they were the 3rd seed last year. Who knows? But then it's on the other side of things where you had the issues in the offseason with Danielle Hunter. They're palpable. We know there have been issues there. And is he probably going to leave the team after the season?
I mean, it's the second year in a row that they had these issues. And we said over and over again how they're going to trade him. They're going to trade him all the way up to this point, and he's playing well for them.
He is, but
he should
then
be traded.
You talk about, hold on.
He should be
traded.
You
talk about value, but you talk about value. You're talking about value. This might be the new peak of his value. You're saying he's playing great for them. He might be the best performing player of all the guys that we've stated so far. Is this where you get the best amount of value back for a guy that I think
can get value doesn't mean you should.
Again, I think this is two different philosophies that it comes up with in this conversation. Like you said, you can get value, but should you? Versus, are you just going to lose this guy after the season? Do you think you go on a run? Realistically, can the Minnesota Vikings go on a run? Because it hasn't happened, because we have to wait. In theory, yes. But if you're other people, I'll admit me, no, I don't think they're going to go on a postseason run.
Look, I don't have them winning anything this year, but
so why not trade Danielle Hunter?
Because it's not like you have another chance next year. This is probably the last year that this team with this configuration happens. I understand that it's only the second year of your head coach, but you have to sign Justin Jefferson. You have to sign Kirk Cousins. Realistically, you're probably not going to sign both. You're going to have to draft a new quarterback. The running game is going to be different next year. They're probably going to have different offensive lines. There's going to be a lot of different defenders next year. To me, they're a team that tries to add. I know they started off slow, but to me, they're a team that tries to add things at the deadline as opposed to shying away from it. I mean, they were
DJ Hawkinson last year.
They were pretty close to beating the Chiefs. They did beat the 49ers. It's 2 of the top 3 teams in the league, in my opinion. They weren't really close to beating the Eagles, but that's a different story.
Which I think if they're the 7th seed, they're probably going to have to face Philly in the divisional round.
They have an easier division. They were going to have to play the Bears again, and they're going to have to play the Packers twice. Did they play the Packers already?
Yeah, I think they played them already.
Okay, they're going to have to play the Packers again this week.
Or
today.
Yeah, they're facing them this week. Yeah.
And they have to play the Lions twice still. In a division where after, the next couple of weeks, they might only be 2 games out. All I'm saying is they still have a major shot to host a playoff game.
To host? You think
If they win their division, they host a playoff game. And again, they're currently
okay, but host versus win then is my thing.
The odds of you winning a playoff game that you host are higher than the odds of a playoff game that you are an away team.
Not in the Minnesota Vikings, Matt, where they lost last year as the third seed.
Okay, fine, whatever. The point is, in a normal team, if you're thinking that way, the idea is we got a shot to host a playoff game. I mean, let's bring out their schedule because I'm pretty sure it lightens up actually coming this week. I know they play the Packers this week. I believe it's another divisional game next week, which would be the Bears.
Okay.
After that, I'm sorry, it's not a divisional game. It's at the Falcons. Then they're home against the Saints.
I mean, they might still beat the Falcons.
Home against the Saints in Denver.
They should win
home
both
against
of those.
The Bears.
They should probably win that.
In Oakland. I'm sorry, in Vegas.
Look, man, I wish Oakland still had more sports teams as well, but it's Vegas now, Justin.
It's in Vegas, and they do play the Packers. This is the first time they're playing the Packers. They have the last 3 games of the year are Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't Vikings. They are the Vikings. Home against the Lions.
Right.
Home against the Packers.
Okay.
In Detroit.
Oh, wow. They saved both Lions games for the end. I completely forgot about that. Okay.
Those are the last 3 games of their year. And if you haven't noticed, there's only one game that I missed, and it was a Bengals game. Let's say they lose that Bengals game. Realistically, they should beat the Packers today in Lambeau. The Falcons, maybe it's close. They probably should win. They should definitely beat the Broncos. Should at least be a close game against the Saints. I don't think the Saints can outscore them, although they do have a good defense.
I love all the shoulds.
They should beat the Bears.
Is the point for me.
They should beat the Raiders. I won't say they're definitely going to win because no team is ever definitely going to win.
I mean, I feel like before this season we were saying about certain teams, oh yeah, they'll win that, they'll win that, they'll win that, compared to a team we're saying they should.
It would be very disappointing for the Vikings this season to not have a winning record with the remaining schedule they have.
And it's Minnesota sports, man. This is what they do. They lose these games. Like
Vikings. Look, I'm not saying that they're going to go. I'm not saying they're going to win. Go on a 7-game winning streak. I'm saying they should win 5 out of the next 6 games, 4 out of the next 6 games. If they win 4 out of 6, that puts them at
7-6.
7-6,
right?
Yes, 7-6. They play the Vikings 7-7, and now they are 7-7 with 3 straight divisional games, including the number 1 team in your conference in your division right now in the Detroit Lions. They have a legitimate shot to, if not make a playoff spot, win their division.
And subsequently lose early in the playoffs. Again, this ultimately to me, this is just different philosophies. Like,
no, because you're assuming that they're definitely going to lose in the playoffs. And I'm not saying they're not. I'm not saying they're not. But I refuse to come in and say, how do you know who are they going to play? What if they go on this win streak and they're the 3 seed and they play a team that currently has a losing record? If they go out and they play Seattle at home,
Seattle's beating them. No,
they can put up 100 points against Seattle. Seattle's beating them. Terrible.
Seattle's beating them. Seattle's for sure beating them. If it's Seattle, Minnesota, Seattle's beating them. Come on now. Come on.
You're going to say that against any team that plays Minnesota?
Oh, no. I'd give them a shot. Like, if you say the Commanders or the Giants somehow they face Minnesota,
they're not making. There aren't playoff teams. They just beat the 49ers. You don't think they could beat the? You think that the Seattle Seahawks are that much better than the 49ers? They just beat the 49ers.
Justin, I expect you to beat a team whose quarterback got a concussion in the 4th quarter. You should win that.
Okay, we can move on.
Like, I understand. It might feel like the opposite. Here's the thing. I think majority of teams, if the Vikings were, what are they now? 3-4,
right? Yes.
If they were 5-2, this wouldn't even be a conversation. You keep Danielle Hunter, you finish off the season, you have a more legitimate shot. If this was Danielle Hunter on another team that's 5-2, even 4-3, I'll say you keep him. Like, I know not every guy that should get traded will get traded. I understand that's how life works. Not everyone does get traded. But if you are the Minnesota Vikings, who you literally just talked about, they might have a new quarterback next season. Now, I'd be we don't know what's going to happen there definitively because it feels like they want to push Kirk Cousins out the door. But who the heck are they going to draft if they go on this run that you're talking about? And if they do squeeze into the playoffs, even if forget even the third seed, let's just say they make it as the 6th or the 7th seed. How are you going to justify not having a high first round pick and letting Kirk Cousins walk?
Because first of all, that's the thing. These teams they don't give a shit about what their draft pick is going to be.
Swear jar.
They don't care. They're not going to tank games so that the team can bring in their replacement. They don't care. They want to win, and they want to win now. And the coaches and the players and even the front office staff, their goal is to win now. And if you look at this schedule, I don't care what you say. They have one of the better offenses in the league. They will get Justin Jefferson back.
Yes.
They do have Jordan Addison, who's playing lights out. They do have TJ Hawkinson, who's a top 5 tight end. They have pretty good offensive line play. By the way, they didn't give up a single sack to the 49ers, who are an excellent, excellent defensive line. Okay. And guess what? They have been in tough games against tough teams. And now their schedule is going to soften up. You're telling me you're going to get rid of their best pass rusher because, just because they make the playoffs doesn't mean they're going to win a Super Bowl. Even if their odds are low. Of course, I'm not saying that they have a better chance than the Eagles, the Niners, even the Bills, the Chiefs. I get that. You are a contender right now. You're not going to sell.
Wait, hold on. We need to make a new word we need to make a new term for talking about you're going to make the playoffs, but you're not going to be favored in any way, shape, or form.
If you make the playoffs, you're a contender for the Super Bowl. That's just by definition.
We're so basic with that.
That's just the definition of it. I'm not saying that I think they're going to win a Super Bowl.
And we need to make a new term.
They are, by definition, contending for a Super Bowl.
They are contending for a playoff spot. I will not put them in Super Bowl contention.
Okay, well, then this is a moot point because no matter what I say, you're going to say that they're not worth a playoff spot. They're not worth this. They're a fraud.
Because purgatory is the worst thing in the world, and being in purgatory.
I know. Listen, I've been a freaking Jets, Knicks, Islanders fan for my entire life. I get it.
No, but
here's no winning.
Here's the thing. You would take what the Vikings have done because it's better than what your teams have done. Now, I don't have a football team I've attached myself to. You wouldn't take 5.
The Jets make 2 straight AFC Championship games.
No,
I've never seen the Vikings do that.
But I'm saying the last 6 years, Minnesota's made the playoffs. What, 5 times the last 6 years? 4 times the last 6 years? Right?
Okay, they've been consistently making the playoffs. They are again, and if you're gonna full reset, that's fine. But that's not where they are right now. It's just not.
But you're saying that's not what they're at now. We're talking about the possibility of them losing Kirk Cousins after this season, no matter what happens to end this year, potentially.
You're insane. Absolutely correct. I've been making that point. If you still have the team together this year, why are you giving up on this year?
Look, because to me, you still have the team together to do what this year? They're not going to win more than one playoff game at most. I'm telling you.
I understand your opinion, but I promise you the players that are there, if they make a playoff, they think that they have what it takes. They are among the best players in the world.
No, I know. I'm not saying they shouldn't have that.
And they are going to win as many games as they can.
I'm not saying they shouldn't have that.
The GM, these guys are not going to give up because Jurg thinks they're not going to win more than a playoff game.
And I'm not saying that they should be giving up. I'm saying I don't say this to get to somehow end up in the modicum of what people hear in the professional sports world. That I know that doesn't happen, obviously.
I know that's not what you're saying.
But I'm saying we need to think logically from the fan watching perspective. I'm just telling people, don't get fooled by this team. We get fooled by these teams every year, every offseason. The Minnesota Vikings are another mid team that, yes, you know what? I'll be with you. They're going to win 5 straight in a row right now, Justin. Starting from this 49ers game, they're going to win 4 or 5 more in a row. And we're going to trick ourselves into thinking this team could do something in the postseason. And maybe they'll win their first postseason game and they will get shellacked afterwards. And then Kirk Cousins will leave them because they don't want to keep him for whatever reason, which I'm actually defending Kirk Cousins for once. How often does that happen on this show? And then Danielle Hunter will leave because he's had his issues with this team the entire time. And so you kept all these pieces, you did all this, that, and the third, and you kept it to win another playoff game, to then lose spectacularly in the postseason again, to lose the quarterback, which, again, you should keep him, but we both believe he's probably gone because Vikings management. And then you're going to lose Hunter and you're going to lose whoever the heck else, which I don't know. We don't know what the free agent list is. To me, it's not worth it to just win one more playoff game and do nothing else. If this is me, if my team isn't going to be a true contender, not contender to make the postseason, not contender to do this, Then no. This was my thing. This was years ago when Bill O'Brien was still like the head coach in Houston. They were okay, right? They just kept winning the AFC South, and they started a season rough. And I was telling Rick, because this was like way back when. This is pre-COVID. Like I was telling him, if you're Houston, you shouldn't keep him after this year. And he was asking me why. I'm like, you're going to keep a coach that
That's such a fan perspective. Because as much as
Justin, what are we? We're not in management.
No, I'm not saying I'm in management, but I'm going to look at it realistically. This is not the way that the team is going to work. The team is not going to take an L because, listen, I understand that you guys think you have a chance, but sorry, we're going to break up the team because one playoff win is not enough for us. That's not the way it works.
Hold on. Just because it's not the way it works doesn't mean it's always the wrong way. Like, look, this is why it seems presumptuous. I'm telling you right now, when all of this happens, like, come on.
I'm not sitting here telling you that the Vikings are going to win a Super Bowl. I'm saying the way that they're going to operate, it does not make sense for them to trade Danielle Hunter because they are among the best teams in the NFC right now. They are among the best offenses in the league right now. They're going to put up points. They're going to be successful, and they will have a shot in January to be one of the teams that competes for a Super Bowl. I'm not saying that they will. I'm not saying that they won't. I'm saying they will have a chance. They are going to most likely make a playoff spot because of a soft schedule and a hot offense. And at that point, you're not giving up your best defensive player because maybe you'll only win one game and then you'll be a different team next year. You're a different team the next year every season. And they're not going to make that change because maybe they'll get a better draft pick the next year. It doesn't work that way. And that's not the way that any team or player or personnel is going to look at it. You asked me if I think he's going to get traded. He's not. And that's why. He's their best defensive player right now. It doesn't make sense for them with the soft schedule coming up after having a strong run against good teams to just bail on the season because, hey, maybe they'll get the 10th pick instead of the 18th pick. No.
Well, mid-teams stay mid for a reason.
Listen, they might be terrible next year. You're right. And they're going to.
I don't know if it's might have. We're talking about all their
Justin Jefferson to a long-term deal. Danielle Hunter's not happy. Maybe none of those guys are on the team next year. I get what you're saying.
Well, you know,
but
Justin
they don't
Jefferson
care about next year right now.
If they apparently lose Kirk Cousins, then yeah, I don't know.
They don't care about next year right now. They care about this year.
Man, I this is again philosophies. I can't operate without not caring about next season at all. I understand if this year's the number one focus, totally fine with that.
This year,
totally fine with that.
Whether or not you agree that they are actually going to do anything,
which you're not going to give them a
shot this year, you're not giving up on this year.
And hold on. I'm not saying that this year shouldn't be the number one focus. Obviously, we only live in
I know what you're saying. You're saying that that they're probably not going to do anything in the playoffs. And realistically, what they should do is they should try and get as many assets as they can so that they can re-sign Justin Jefferson to a long-term deal and get him a legitimate pass thrower so that he could be good for a long time. They have Jordan Addison on a rookie deal. They just signed TJ Hawkinson. I get it. They're not going to give up their best defensive player in a season where they are primed to now make a run and make a playoff spot to get what might be a decent quarterback midway through the draft. Because let's face it, even if they trade Danielle Hunter, they're still probably going to win the majority of the rest of their games. It is a very soft schedule.
God, the NFC is weak.
It just is. Raiders suck. It just is. So why are you giving up a guy that's going to get you probably double-digit sacks on a defense that's struggled to get to get what? The 12th pick in the draft? Where you're going to miss out on Drake May and you're going to miss out on Caleb Williams and you're going to get a mid quarterback who you may not develop. Realistically, you got a better shot at taking somebody in the second or third round that's going to develop than you do and passing up one of the top talents in the draft at 12. You might as well wait, stay where you are. They've actually had tons of success drafting later in rounds, as you've seen in the last couple of years, because they did end up with both Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson in the 20s. They've been
hold on. That like drafting a first round pick's a first round pick, and this is a whole different conversation. First round pick.
There are lots of teams that don't end up well with first round picks.
Well, Philadelphia, welcome to the conversation when it comes to Jalen Reagor. But
I was going to say they're doing pretty good.
Well,
that's one example.
I specifically say Jalen Reagor because Jalen Reagor led to Justin Jefferson and a whole host of other things. Yes. What a deal that was. Which I will. Anyways, no. This is what I'm saying. I feel like I don't claim to have a crystal ball on this. I know with the Minnesota Vikings what's going to happen, and that if they are for sure going to lose Kirk Cousins after this year, and we believe they will, because until given otherwise notice, the front office just seems hell bent on moving on him. Again, I'm not a Kirk Cousins fan, but they want to give him up. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me how. But they just want.
It's been weird the way they've been signing up to one-year deals.
But and this thing with all the cap gymnastics, with the fact they had to cut Cook and everything, like it doesn't even sound like they want to give him another 1-year deal again. It sounds like they're ready to let go of him. Which, okay, fine. We'll criticize you for that too, ultimately. But I think if we know what the fate is going to be, you're holding on to all this for what? Why are you holding on to all this? Like, I'm saying this of we know what's going to happen. And at this time next year, when it is somebody else throwing it to Justin Jefferson, when Danielle Hunter's not on the team, I'm not saying that Danielle Hunter and trading him or not is the difference between your future being better definitively. But what I'm saying is, if you're just going to lose all these pieces anyway, and you weren't going to gain like the ultimate goal from it, like why keep it? Why stay mid? Why stay in purgatory? I pick heaven or pick hell, or HE double hockey sticks. I don't know. Like pick one or the other. Pick one or the other. And if you want to stay mid, okay, cool. But when this conversation gets brought back up and the Vikings lose early in the playoffs again and they have this terrible offseason, okay then. Like, I know what you're saying is going to happen, Justin. I know this 100%. That doesn't mean it's going, like, that doesn't mean it makes them smart.
I'm not saying whether or not it's the right or wrong move long term. I understand your point. I'm just saying, you asked me if Danielle Hunter is getting traded. I told you no, and I told you why.
And I'm telling you he should be, and I'm telling you why.
Good.
But there that is. I think that was the last name on the list. Did you have anybody else?
I don't even remember. Maybe.
All right. So while the Denver Broncos and the Minnesota Vikings have led the conversation on this podcast for what might be hopefully the last time this season, Justin, let's move on.
Not after what we said.
Yeah. Well,
it might become very irrelevant very soon.
Well, one of them will. I don't know about the Broncos, but I think one of them has a chance comparatively. Let's move on to the last portion of the program here. If I can find the goddamn lower thirds here. Oh, here we are. Pick challenge. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is the hashtag SAOC pick challenge. You guys know how this works. Rick, Justin, and I go on a scale of our 4-point pick to our 1-point pick to pick games from the slate of contests happening in the NFL on a given week. 4 points being our most confident, 1 point being our least confident. In efforts to win at the end of the season. What do we win at the end of the year? Pride and glory, basically. That's kind of about it.
What we win is getting to see the other person buy a jersey they don't want to buy.
Basically, that's honestly what happens. So that is the current case of things right now. Although we really need to clean that up because we were talking about getting the jersey if we got our preseason predictions wrong. I don't know if we ever figured it out with the pick challenge itself. We need to clean stuff up on the show.
We gotta consult the list master when he gets back.
Yeah, basically. But in the meanwhile, let's move on with that. The current standings, which the Podfather himself has actually sent us at this point, which we thank Rick for his continued contributions as always, if I could pull up the thing right now. Presently, at this moment of time, Rick keeps his spot in first place with 50 points, so the first person to break the 50-point barrier this season. Justin is second in the competition. I am third, and then Billy Shakes is all the way down in last place, which, realistically, an inanimate object should be in last place. I don't know how Sandoval was as good as he was last season, Justin.
Wasn't good to me.
I was just saying generally.
It wasn't a competition for us, Jared.
Very true, very true. Okay, so at this juncture, and by the way, we can pick a tie if we so choose to, ladies and gentlemen, but we need to make it our first pick, which makes it from a 4-pointer to a 5-pointer. We must all pick at least one upset, which the lowest an upset can be is our 2-point pick. And those upsets and all the lines we taking these games off of are coming from our friends via
Caesars Sportsbook.
Beautiful. All right, Justin, let's get this show on the road in this week's hashtag SAOC pick challenge. And the first pick goes to me. So let me just pull up the slate of games here. I have the slate of games. Do you want me to have it up for you or do you have it in front of you?
I have it.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure, brother. Okay, so going through the slate of games, my first selection here, we're talking about a bunch of different games earlier. We kind of like vaguely mentioned like who some teams could be facing in this week, Justin. So in terms of who my 4-point pick is going to be, see, I had a troll 4-point pick idea for a second, but I'm not going to make the troll pick. No, I might make them my 3-point pick. You'll see. Well, it depends on what you and Rick do. I will say this, just a quick word to the wise. The Denver Broncos game against Kansas City, as of now, it is slated to have some snow in that game and extremely cold temperatures. I just want to give that context for you.
In
And
Denver?
yes, it is in Denver. Hold on, let me try to pull up. It wasn't a tweet that I saw. It was a post about it. If I can, because I want to give you guys what you. I don't know if Rick is listening to the show right now. So forecast for Sunday's Chiefs Broncos game in Denver calls for a high of 29 degrees, a low of 13, with 6 to 14 inches of snow per the National Weather Service. That is just what it is as of now. Could it change? Absolutely, but I just want to give you both the context properly. Mainly more so you, because again, Rick is not here. But he will be making his picks. We have communications open with the Podfather, ladies and gentlemen, so the picks will be made as this goes. Oh, no rain podium 10 this week. How sad. Okay, Justin, without further ado, my first pick. Look, man, you better win this one. I'm going to pick the Ravens over the Cardinals. If they lose this, everyone's a fraud. Everyone just ends up being a fraud, but I'll pick the Ravens over the Cardinals for my first pick.
All right. Well, that leaves me with a number of different games. And a few of them I'm actually kind of worried about. I would have been very inclined to pick a Chiefs victory there, but the snow has me worried for sure. That's the kind of game that the Denver Broncos are probably going to want to play. I won't pick the Jets. I think I'm afraid to go against the Patriots, but I think I'm going to have to pick the Dolphins here. Yeah, it's got to be Dolphins. They should be the team that wins against the New England. But I mean, would you really be surprised at this point now if New England ends up with one win against each team in the division?
All their wins just happen to be against the AFC East.
Yeah, right.
Just continue to torture. Okay. So we have made our first two picks, so we're going to be waiting at the moment for the Podfather. He has told us that he is in a good spot. He said, oh my God. He just sent a massive text string. So let me give this to you right now. Rick clearly pre-wrote these, waiting for us to make our selection. So perfect. Okay. Justin, his 4-point pick will be Atlanta over Tennessee. The Titans have no QB, therefore it makes their offense one-dimensional. Mike Vrabel hasn't announced a starter, so it could be Will Levis or Malik Willis, although I'm pretty sure it's going to be Will Levis. Neither of whom are Tyson Bagent. I love it. Even though Derrick Henry is the king, he put that in quotes, a king is only as good as his surrounding court. That's actually a good one right there, Rick. Atlanta gets the win with a more versatile offense, and their defense does just enough to keep Henry pinned down. That's actually a fair analysis. Okay. And then 3 points. Jets over the Giants. Tyrod Taylor was decent last week, but the Giants won a grinder against Washington. It wasn't an impressive win whatsoever. And they haven't really put up that many more points, even with Tyrod Taylor in the lineup, comparatively speaking. That's me. That's my note, not Rick's. The Jets are fresh off their bye week and should be able to take care of business, as their defense should be healthy enough to keep Saquon limited. Gang Green gets bragging rights. So there's that. By the way, real quick, Justin, before your 3-point pick, how did you feel about Garrett Wilson? I think it was Garrett Wilson. What he said about the Jets and Giants. Like, I don't know if he was referring to the teams or the fans, where it's like, they don't root against each other, like they're rooting for each other, because I guess like it's the whole like, oh, we're both New York teams type deal. What do you think about that?
I didn't see him say that. That has not been my experience. It is something I do. I always root for the Giants. It very rarely affects my my guys in green. If it does affect my guys in green, I obviously root for whatever benefits the Jets most. And I'm not insecure enough to think that I have to be the best team in New York. I don't really. If I win more games, I'm the best team in New York. It's fine. But yeah, I mean, like, I rooted for the Giants in both those Super Bowls
Against the Patriots, right?
Yeah, it's not even close. I had a harder time choosing a team when it was Philly, New England.
Right. Because there's hate. No, I guess I get
Philly, but like, it didn't feel good.
I guess I was just curious about that.
Yeah, no, I didn't even see him say that, but I don't disagree. I root for the Giants most of the time. Obviously not this week, and I'm glad that Rick picked that game, because now I could pick the Philadelphia Eagles to beat the Washington Commanders. I know that Washington tends to win games like this, especially when it's in Washington, but I really think Philly's going to pull this out. It doesn't make any sense to me for them to lose a game like this, so that's where I'm going to go.
Okay, so I'm looking at the spread here. I will say this, even though I don't know who will pick it eventually. Just for the record, for both of you, there is one even game on the slate this week. I actually do want to say.
No, I wanted to pick them, but I can't pick them as an upset because it's not an upset.
Exactly. So for those maybe wondering, if you're looking at the same slate as us, when it comes to even games, they technically in our verse of things count as a regular. Like they're just there. Like they don't count as your upset. You just pick it. So that's in case anyone is wondering about that. There, we gotta explain things to the people. So just so that is given there. For my 3-point pick here, Justin, I am going to be going with an upset as well here. Well, actually, no, you didn't pick an upset right there. I'm going to go with the Colts over the Saints. The Saints are favored at 2.5. I don't know why. Can you help me? I don't understand why. Derek Carr has looked dreadful. He's throwing the ball out of bounds and yelling at his receivers for not catching it. Who was the tight end that didn't catch it in the end zone against Jacksonville? Was it Austin Moreau? That's not his fault at all. The dude is coming back battling cancer. He shouldn't have had to make a play like that. So I don't put any blame on him. I put blame on the fact that you're so bad you fall down by the 2 scores, Derek Carr, and you suddenly become something in the 4th quarter. So please, oh please, just be a fraud that we know you are and lose.
You're rooting for him to be a fraud, not success?
No, I don't care about Derek Carr. I like earlier in his career, Derek Carr, like I felt he was actually overhated, and I was a Derek Carr supporter. But going back to going back to last season or late 2021, I'm like, he's good, but he's not special. And again, this is my thing. When we overhype players to be more than what they really are meant to be, because we're in such a culture of we got to hype everyone up and we got to prop everyone up, I'm honestly not for that. Like mid players are mid players. It's okay to admit to be mid, guys. I'm below mid. If we're talking about humans, I'm below mid. Like I can accept that. So the fact that we try to hype everyone else up to be more than they are, I'm not a fan of that. I'm all for giving people confidence and optimism. I do that for my coworkers all the time. I don't believe in hyping up mid athletes to be more than what they are. So that's just me. So the Colts, all that aside, is my 3-point pick. I will message Rick my pick, so don't worry about that, Justin. And for my 2-point pick, Justin's gonna be so mad when I make this pick. I'm picking the Vikings over the Packers for my 2-point pick.
I'm not that mad. There's good reason for that to be.
No, I thought you were just gonna react, be like all that talk we just had, and I go with the Vikings to win.
No, because I know how you feel about the Packers.
Yeah, that's
like
very
we're playing the Seahawks.
Very true.
Yeah, but I am going to pick that game, and I'm not going to pick the Seahawks because I need an upset, and I think that's the best upset caliber game on the schedule. I'm going to pick the Browns over the Seahawks.
Ooh, okay. Do you real quick as we wait for the Podfathers selections here, real quick? You mentioned that, and we talked about the whole DeShaun Watson getting injured, and now it's like relying on the Browns defense. What do you think about? And as again, we're waiting on Rick here. I gave a little bit of the mention when it came to why I'm picking the Colts over the Saints. So like for my upset for that, I think the Colts defense, aside from that Browns game, has had moments this year where they're fine. I don't think the Saints are an overwhelming offense in any way. I don't think Pete Carmichael is a great offensive coordinator. And I think Gardner Minshew has shown he can put together a good drive. So I think that's what's going to be the case. And then ultimately, as Podfather texts us alrighty, so I don't know if that means we took his picks or not. As we await his official selections. Justin, is there any concern that this could be the week? 2 great weeks in a row where they were able to do it. Is there any concern that this could be the week where it's going to take more than PJ Walker putting 0 touchdowns and 1 interception on the board to finally get a win for Cleveland?
I think it generally takes that every week. I mean, look, if we're relying on PJ Walker and Kareem Hunt to score 2 touchdowns every week, you're probably not going to win a ton of games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm relying on the strength that is that defense right now, and I'm expecting them to at least, cause some havoc, cause a few turnovers. I know Gino's very efficient. He's only got 4 turnovers on the year. 5 turnovers on the year. But look, it's not like they've been lighting the world on fire. They have 2 high-scoring games, and then for the most part, they've scored about 20 points or less. So they're going to have to put up a lot more points on Seattle than I think they would. On Cleveland as they would a normal team, because I do think Cleveland's going to get their chances. I think that there will be some short field situations where they'll kick some field goals, and it's a tough game for Seattle to win in those settings. They're not built to play a team like the Browns.
Okay. Since we have the time, we could give that context.
Absolutely.
Okay, I will give the Podfathers 2-point pick here. It is his upset pick. He is going to pick Carolina over Houston, which actually for myself, I picked over on my other podcast. Why? Because they have to win eventually, right? Battle of the top two QBs, even though Carolina's defense is porous in the passing attack. I believe this is the time for them to win number one. I think he meant to win game number one. But so Rick is going with the Panthers for his upset pick at his 2. I don't blame him at all. I think if the Panthers are going to win a game here, I think it probably is going to be this one is their best shot. And they're probably going to get an upset pick here. We got the 1-pointer. 1-point pick is the Lions. He didn't give any analysis. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. Even with the news that you actually gave, I picked against the Raiders before. I'll do it again. I like that.
That's fair. That's a fair pick.
Absolutely, because even because you broke the news. Well, we're live. Yeah, you broke the news to the people, Justin, that Jimmy Garoppolo is coming back to play for this game. I don't think that matters. I think Detroit is going to win this game with relative ease. And we talk about get back games, revenge games. This is kind of a get back game for the Lions, who had they got roughshotted by the Ravens, and you've got to reestablish yourself in division and conference. You got to get a win. If Minnesota is projected to get a win over Green Bay here, and they're apparently going to be catching up and make a Super Bowl run, like some people on podcasts say, you got to start picking up these wins when you can as well. So
Kirk Cousins Super Bowl champion. What would happen if Kirk Cousins wins the Super Bowl, Jerry? What are you willing to bet?
I'm not betting anything on that. Hold on. You assume that I have the same vitriol for Kirk Cousins like I do for Russell Wilson and Ryan Tannehill. I like Kirk Cousins way more than those two jamokes.
I mean, you started that sentence off. I was going to call you a liar, but then you said more than, and I was like, whew. But no, you don't like Kirk Cousins. And as you've consistently said, he is a fraud. And he is a terrible quarterback.
No. Hold on.
All the time.
Hold on. Russell Wilson.
Captain check down.
Stop. Yes, I've called him captain check down. I've called the Vikings frauds. Don't use my words and put them to individuals. I've called the Vikings frauds. I have called Kirk Cousins captain check down. I will 100% keep with that. But here's the thing, Justin. Here's the thing. Kirk Cousins, to me, has always, relatively speaking, been in a spot where if for a week or two he can actually show that he's maybe a little bit better than what he is, he's actually had some games here and there. Ryan Tannehill has never done that for me. Russell Wilson is a bona fide fraud, if anything speaks for itself. And if he had not gone to the Seattle Seahawks, he wouldn't even have a Super Bowl in his career. So Kirk Cousins, actually, to me, is the most realistic between the others. So yes, I will take Kirk Cousins over the Subway partnership fraud that is Russell Wilson
bar
and Ryan Tannehill. Hey, Justin, you know what you do when you have low bars? Jump.
All right, I'm going to go with the Chargers over Rick's Bears. I think this is going to be a get-right game for them. I'm afraid to pick some of the other games, like Chiefs-Broncos with some snow, or 49ers-Bengals with all the question marks going on in that game. So I'm going to go with the Chargers. I think that Tyson Bagent gets to meet Khalil Mack up close and personal. He might say hello to Joey Bosa a couple times. And I think Austin Eckler is finally going to get his feet back under him after that injury, because he has been slow starting the last few games. I don't expect that to continue.
Justin, real quick here, just so we can help out Rick here, because to finalize the picks this week. What are the remaining games right now? It's Bengals, Niners, Chiefs, Broncos, Jags, Steelers, and is there one more that I'm missing, or is that all of them?
I don't believe anyone picked Cowboys, Rams.
Cowboys, Rams. Okay, I just want to give Rick the full slate of what is available. Okay, cool. Because Billy Shakes this is the first 3-game week that Billy Shakes has had in a little bit here, which I was shocked. I didn't realize that everyone was playing in week 8 again. I didn't realize that. So there's that. So these are the 4 games left, ladies and gentlemen. It's Bengals, Niners, Chiefs, Broncos, Jags, Steelers, Rams, Cowboys. I have always viewed the 1-point pick as having a little bit of value here, so I'm not going to just throw this away. I do find it very, very nice to be able to nail this pick. Do I go with another upset here, or do I stick with what I still think will be a good result? It just might be a little bit tricky. I know they're going to lose again eventually. I just don't know if this is going to necessarily be it. And I think the value at them winning with a 1-pointer is obviously better than them winning with another one. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs over the Broncos for my 1-point pick. So I am going to send that remaining slate of games here to the Podfather. Okay, so I picked Chiefs. All right, so while we wait for Rick to give us Billy Shakes picks here, Justin, you go with the Chargers, I go with the Chiefs. Ironically, the 2 teams that faced off in this past week, the AFC West teams. I'm with you. I think the Chargers, real quick, because I kind of referenced them earlier. I don't think just because we have mentioned trade deadline, this kind of ties it all back together. I don't think the Chargers are making a trade here, Justin, because Tom Telesco has proven he's not necessarily the type to go for a big move during the season. I don't think he's ever made a significant trade deadline move since he's been with the Chargers, at least not one I can commit to memory. A lot of the work he does tends to be in the offseason. Again, This is why I'm trying to go with trends, right? Mm-hmm. What do you think about the Chargers? Like, their season's on life support is what I would describe it as. Like, they need this win. What do you think a win against the Bears will do for them here real quick?
What will it do for them?
I don't know. I got to ask a question.
It'll make them 3-4.
I thought they were 2-5.
They're 2-4 right now. They had their bye already.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. That explains. See,
it'll make them 3-4. Look,
these weird bye weeks, man. I thought. Okay. Anyways,
they had week 5 was their bye.
Jesus.
And no bye week 8, which is weird.
It feels like week 5. Yeah, that's why I was saying, because we have this full slate. I feel like week 5 should just be a no bye week, and week 8 should be the bye. Anyways, whatever.
They'll be competing for a wild card spot, I think, at some point. I mean, look, they play the Broncos twice still. They play the Raiders again. They play the Packers. They do play the Jets, and they play the Bears this week. So there's a lot of winnable games left on their schedule. I don't expect them to be world beaters.
Right.
They will probably not make it to double-digit wins at this point. But would you be surprised at this point if they were 9-8?
No, not really. That kind of is where they lived. It's been the case.
Look, 9-8 might be enough to make the 7th seed.
Maybe. But, well, if this was the NFC, absolutely. God dang that.
Well, it's not the NFC, though, so that's the issue. I mean, right now the 7th seed is Buffalo at 5-3, but things will change, especially after the rest of the teams play this week.
Yeah. All right. So, finish this off. Sandoval's I'm thinking of last year. Billy Shakes' selections for this week are the Cowboys at 3, the Bengals for his upset pick at 2, and he will pick the Jaguars as his 1-point pick. So, lock him in. So those are the selections there. So for Rick, Justin, and myself, let me put this all together. So for me, I went with the the Baltimore Ravens as my 4-point pick, the Colts as my 3-point pick, the Vikings as my 2-point pick, and the Kansas City Chiefs as my 1-point pick. Lord above, pick. Justin, for yourself, you went with the Dolphins at your 4-point pick, the Eagles at your 3-point pick, which is ironic considering they faced each other last week. You picked Cleveland over Seattle for your 2-point pick, and you picked the and you picked the Chargers over the Bears for your 1-point pick. Rick's picks are as follows. He picked the Falcons over the Tennessee Titans. He picked the Jets over the Giants. He picked the Carolina Panthers over the Houston Texans. And he picked the Lions as his 1-point pick because no analysis there. He didn't really need much analysis there for that. So those are our picks, and that completes this week's edition of the hashtag SAOC Pick Challenge. And because no Podfather this week, no rant podium. Rick, even if you text one, I'm not gonna read it out. That brings an end to this week's edition of the show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on the 80th episode of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. How we've gotten to 80, I don't know. But hey, we're pushing 20 weeks from now. Justin, if I'm not wrong, Justin, I think we're going to hit 100 like at some point in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken here by the math. Or maybe a little bit after the playoffs, if I'm doing the math right.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But we will have a 100 episode one day soon enough, ladies and gentlemen. But for now, thank you so much for joining us on episode number 80, talking about unlucky week 7, talking about the NFL trade deadline, the Broncos and the Vikings getting more screen and audio time than they probably should get at this point. But maybe one of them will learn more. And of course, the pick challenge extraordinaire. Will Rick maintain first place over Justin? What ground can I make up in the standings? Will Billy Shakes ever be better than what Sandoval was picking last season? Probably not. All the question answered and more on next week's edition of the show, which of course is always highlighted by fun of football and chaos. Take care, everybody.